Chapter 1739, Crushed by Regulations. Since Ling Han vanished, the Ding clan had been searching for his whereabouts all this while. However, the celestial realm was too big, and the Ding clan was only a one-star force. Even in Dark Moon City, they did not have full power, what more when they were out of Dark Moon City. Thus, they could only guess a few locations where they could possibly find him, such as Black Moon City, the Severing Mundane Pool, or other locations for severing mundane. Perhaps, even if Ling Han wanted to sever mundane, he would not dare to go to the Severing Mundane Pool. Knowing that the Ding clan was watching out for him, he might switch to another place. There were only over a dozen severing mundane ancestors in the Ding clan. Furthermore, they could not turn out in full force either. What if the other two clans took advantage of the opening and robbed them? If there was a chance, they were sure that the Duan clan and Long clan would definitely not be reserved. Ding Yaolong had to stay back as overseer. As for Ding Shan and Ding Song, one of them had gone to Black Moon City, while the other had gone to the Han clan. Even if Han Lu had torn the Ding clan's ancestral shrine apart, the Ding clan still had to send someone over to give an explanation, which would resolve their misunderstanding with the Han clan once and for all. There were too few elites, so only Ding Xing alone had come to the Severing Mundane Pool. Because if Ling Han wanted to sever the mundane, there were only those few places where he could do so. The Ding clan knew that Ling Han was freakish. Once he broke through to the Severing Mundane, it was extremely possible that even a first Severance Grand Elder would be no match for him. Thus, the one standing guard here was Ding Xing. A second Severance. A second Severance against a first Severance, and one that had just broken through at that. If the matter still could not be resolved, what justice was there left in this world? Ling Han glanced at Ding Xing. Though he did not know his name, he had seen this person at the Ding clan's ancestral shrine before. Recalling the Ding clan's ancestral shrine, Ling Han couldn't help but ask, are the repairs of your ancestral shrine done? Fuck. Ding Xing's self-control was definitely excellent. Among those who could cultivate to the level of the Severing Mundane tier, just which one of them had not experienced innumerable storms, and wasn't a person who would not show their emotions? But when Ling Han said these words, Ding Xing immediately wanted to leap up in fury. You actually have the nerve to ask? Evil brat, if it were not for you, how could the ancestral shrine of our Ding clan have been torn apart? He couldn't help but roar loudly, his eyes bulging in fury. You're already so old, yet you still do not know how to cultivate your moral and mental character. Shouting and screaming so loudly, what if you disturb kids? Ling Han asked with a grin. He did not mind making things worse for the Ding clan and pouring salt on their wounds. The members of your clan have done so many misdeeds, so what is the point of worshipping the memorial tablets of those villains? A crooked stick will have a crooked shadow. Die. Initially, Ding Xing had planned to put on airs of superiority so that Ling Han would fully feel the pressure of impending death, but he had exploded in fury when they had just barely exchanged a few words. He could not stop himself from stretching out a hand to press down on Ling Han. Ling Han had not moved, and the Empress was the first to move. She had just broken through to the Severing Mundane tier, and was presently eager to try out her new strength. Shua, a flash of sword light streaked out, dazzling the 9 heavens. Ding Xing's expression changed drastically, and the large hand he had stretched out immediately withdrew. If that flash of sword light struck him, the regulations of heaven and earth would lash back, and he would be injured. As for how severe his injuries would be, he was unsure. But he did not dare try. What if it was a powerful attack? He felt lingering fear. Aside from those limited few that he had come across, there had never been anyone else that could make him feel immense pressure and fear that he would lose if he fought with just a single move. He knew this woman. She was Ling Han's companion. Previously, she was only in the Genesis tier, but was now in the Severing Mundane tier. This meant that she had just successfully severed the mundane, and also meant that she was only a first severance. He was a second severance. The Empress was not going to be merciful. She charged out, and began a merciless offensive against Ding Xing. Ding Xing could not do anything, and could only parry. But after they had exchanged blows, his disadvantageous position was really too clear. He vaguely showed a hint of dropping into a disadvantage. This was not unusual. The Empress had already cultivated to the true pinnacle level of the Eternal River tier. This meant that she only had to break through to the Severing Mundane tier, and she would be invincible among her peers. Furthermore, she had struck the heaven and earth, and had advanced into the Severing Mundane tier through a flawless severance, which made her invincible among her peers again. With these two advantages added together, she would be invincible even against an opponent that was superior to her by a whole minor level. A second severance that could match her would either had to have cultivated to the true pinnacle level of the Eternal River tier, or had to similarly have advanced by striking the heaven and earth. Now, though Ding Xing was superior to her by a minor level, he had not achieved either of these two requirements, and was not a king tier at all, so how could he possibly be able to compete with a king among kings like the Empress? Ding Xing's expression changed to a shocked one, yet he still could not turn the situation around, and was at the brunt of the Empress's blows, his aged face incredibly sullen. The hierarchy of the celestial realm was strict. A second severance was absolutely capable of crushing a first severance. Even if there were occasional appearances of king tiers, surpassing that gap of a whole minor level would result in a tie with a veteran elite at most, and it was utterly impossible that the latter would be overwhelmed. Hiss, why were those people that were with Ling Han all monsters? Ding Xing struck a few more times, his expression becoming uglier and uglier. After he had blocked a few moves, he turned around to flee. No, if they continued, he would die here. Then what was the point of fighting any longer? Furthermore, both Ling Han and the Empress were so freakish, so if they became third severance, wouldn't that mean that even Ding Yaolong would not be able to suppress them? He had to bring this news back so that the three great elites Ding Yaolong, Ding Shan, and Ding Song would move out personally. By now, only they would be capable of suppressing these two freaks. Otherwise, if they were given more time to grow, then it was really possible that the Ding clan would be done for. Why are you in such a rush to leave? We haven't reminisced enough. Ling Han stepped in his path. He had cultivated the secret technique of lightning, so his speed was extraordinarily fast. His whole person turned into a bolt of lightning, capable of cutting off even a second severance Grand Elder. You're courting death. Though Ding Xing had begun to flee, he was still putting on airs of a second severance Grand Elder. He rebuked Ling Han coldly, and waved a hand to deliver a palm strike at the latter. He had cultivated water regulations, and had also used a secret technique in this attack. Ice formed, planning to freeze 1,000 miles around them. Ling Han couldn't help but smile. A competition of regulations with him? You had to cultivate to the third severance, at least, to even be qualified. Boom, he released the 9 heavens flame. Immediately, the flames formed 9 streaks that surged out from his body. Every streak of flame had taken the form of an immortal beast. There were dragons, phoenixes, and vermilion birds, and they were numerous. As the immortal beasts of flame stormed, the coldness immediately retreated, and no longer appeared. A muscle twitched in Ding Xing's cheek. He had not even unleashed his powerful move, yet could no longer follow up on it. His regulations had been hindered, but how could this be possible? No matter how freakish Ling Han's battle prowess was, it was still limited by his cultivation level. How could the comprehension of regulations of a first severance compare to a second severance? But the reality was really that exaggerated. Someone that had just broken through to the first severance actually managed to completely crush a veteran second severance in terms of the height of their regulations. He naturally would not know that this was not the regulations that Ling Han had grasped, but rather that the 9 heavens flame was the life force of the heaven and earth itself. And you, a mere second severance, actually dared to compare the height of your regulations with the life force of heaven and earth? Ling Han smiled slightly, and said, "Let me pay you back with a move." He withdrew the 9 heavens flame, and channeled out the Xianin source water. Immediately, the high temperature around them that was like a volcano dropped madly. Multiple swords of ice with patterns of great Tao inscribed on them appeared in mid-air, their coldness sinister and frightening. Holy fuck! At this moment, Ding Xing's surprised expression was as if he had just seen a ghost. Water regulations. This was fuck water regulations. Impossible. Ling Han had only just advanced into the first severance, and could at most just barely strengthen one regulation to the height of the severing mundane tier. But not only could Ling Han crush him with fire regulations, his water regulations were also incredibly terrifying, definitely being superior to his own grasp over the water regulations. Where did you get so much time to cultivate? Have you taken the wrong medicine? My heavens, how could it be that such a monster would exist? Chapter 1740, Tower of Three Realms. Ding Xing was shocked, his figure quickly retreating. However, the ice attacked, and his movements became incredibly and extraordinarily slow. The Empress charged over, delivering a palm strike at the air. Pang! Ding Xing's figure immediately exploded into tens of thousands of pieces like an ice carving. Every single shard of ice could clearly be seen, and there was definitely not a single drop of blood spilled. Xianin source water, the coldest existence in this world. However, a second severance Grand Elder would not die so easily. Ding Xing's spirit escaped his body, intending to flee. His spirit took the form of a tiny figure the size of a fist. The moment it left his body, its speed was extremely fast. A spirit that had lost the support of the physical body was a very dangerous thing. A severing mundane tier Grand Elder could not be killed, but his spirit was comparatively more fragile, and it was very easy to be hunted down. What was the purpose of hunting it down? Firstly, it could be directly refined, and one could extract the comprehension of regulations that a cultivator had accumulated throughout his lifetime. Secondly, it could be sealed into some forbidden tool and become a one-time deadly weapon that had incredible might. Additionally, the concoction of some alchemical pills also required a spirit to make up for the shortage of certain regulations. However, the spirit was extremely difficult to capture. Without the burden of the physical body, its speed was astonishingly fast. Having the same lifespan as the heaven and earth, this cultivation level was extremely difficult to reach, but it was likewise very difficult to die. The Empress humphed coldly, and shot out a finger. Xiao, a streak of sword light swept past, its speed even faster. Pa, Ding Xing's spirit was shattered, scattering in all directions like a firework. A second severance elite, dead. The Empress and Ling Han exchanged a look. They were both king tiers among first severance, and if they were still unable to deal with Ding Xing with the two of them joining forces now, that would be really illogical. Let's go find the others first. Who knows if Changsun Liang and the other guys have gotten into a fight, Ling Han said. The three of them left, heading towards Moon Scattering City. Why did the Black Tower not open the 7th floor? Ling Han suddenly thought. I don't know, either. Small Tower was a little dazed. After you advanced into the severing mundane tier, I regained some more memories, but at the same time, I have also gained some new questions. Now, the only thing I can confirm is that I know who I am. Aren't you the Tsundra Tower? You're saying that you know the Black Tower's real name? Ling Han asked. The Black Tower was only a name that he had casually come up with. It appeared to be completely black in color, so this was the name he had given it. In truth, his knowledge of the Black Tower was quite limited. Small Tower nodded. My original name is Tower of Three Realms. Crack. All of a sudden, a clap of thunder rang out, as if the heaven and earth itself were shaking. Ling Han was involuntarily stunned. This should be the reaction that the heavens had towards the words, Tower of Three Realms. For certain objects that could affect the heaven and earth, directly calling out their names would draw a reaction from the heaven and earth. It was said that celestial kings were beings like this. Directly calling out the name of a living celestial king would cause a sudden clap of thunder in the middle of nowhere. But the problem here was that his conversation with Small Tower was only limited to his mind. The Tower of Three Realms, was it really so awesome? Do not think of this name again, and never speak it directly, Small Tower declared solemnly. This will draw the attention of several truly powerful figures, and they could reach this place with a single thought. When the Black Tower had fallen into the lower realm, was it also for the purpose of avoiding the divine sense of these mighty figures? Hold on, the Azura Demon Emperor had said before that the lower realm had long since entered into the immortal realm through opening the sky before, yet had descended back into becoming a small world again. This drew great curiosity from the immortal realm and the netherworld, and that was why the Azura Demon Emperor and innumerable other immortal level elites had entered into various small worlds. Could it be that the Black Tower or the previous owner of the Black Tower thought that throwing the Black Tower into the immortal realm was not enough of an insurance, and had thus deliberately stuffed the Black Tower back to a lower level again? But why did it have to bring a small world along with it? You could have directly entered into a small world, and wouldn't it be more covert? Ling Han asked Small Tower, but Small Tower could not answer any questions. There was no result to be gotten from this exchange, and Ling Han did not waste any more time. The three of them soon returned to Moon Scattering City. Ling Han did not need to deliberately make queries to clearly find out about the major incidents that had happened in these few days, because this was the hottest topic of conversation. Changsun Liang, Xiaofan, Song Ji, Ma Ying, and other young king tiers had all successfully advanced to the Severing Mundane, and they had respectively engaged in several great battles. In the first match, Changsun Liang vs Xiaofan, the result was a tie. In the second match, Song Ji challenged Changsun Liang, and the result was still a tie. In the third match, Ma Ying and Xiaofan battled for 3 days and 3 nights, and the result was that Ma Ying suffered a narrow loss by a single move. Judging from these results, the battle prowess of the top-tier prodigies was quite equal. Even if Ma Ying had a narrow loss, it could also be due to various minor factors, and it could not be claimed that she was really the weakest among the four in terms of strength. Furthermore, a spar was different from a life-or-death duel. Everyone definitely had a great many powerful moves that they had not shown. Additionally, some young elites had also popped out. Though they were slightly weaker than Changsun Liang and the others, they could still be considered prodigies. Furthermore, the path of cultivation was still very long, so they might still have a chance of surpassing Changsun Liang and the others. These were incidents that had already taken place, and there was still a great event that had not taken place. The Fu clan would be hosting a great banquet tomorrow night, inviting all the prodigies that had successfully broken through in this time's opening of the Severing Mundane Pool. Some prodigies were definitely worth recruiting, such as Changsun Liang, Xiaofan, and the others. The Fu clan was not old-fashioned, and would frequently draw young prodigies into the clan, and the prodigies would also be glad to join a 3-star force. Even though there was only the difference of a single star between 2 stars and 3 stars, the gap was practically as wide as the distance between heaven and earth. For example, even if Changsun Liang was very talented, if he had not been nurtured with the full efforts of a 3-star force, the possibility of him advancing into the Immortal Palace tier was practically zero. The inheritance of cultivation was the fruit of intelligence accumulated over innumerable years by innumerable elites. To break through to a completely new cultivation level through one's own efforts was much, much too difficult. The words king tier only represented talent in cultivation and battle prowess that was invincible amongst one's peers, but did not represent the power of creation. Advancing into a completely new, unknown cultivation level would require creating one's own cultivation technique, and this actually did not have much relation with being a king tier. Thus, everyone wanted to gain a ticket into the Fu clan. There were many people who could go to the Fu clan this time because Ling Han and the Empress had advanced by successfully striking the heaven and earth, leading to a certain change in destiny, which made it relatively easier to advance to the Severing Mundane tier this time round. Those that initially had had no hopes had also successfully reached the Severing Mundane tier by now. Those that initially could only barely step into the Severing Mundane tier were now ordinary Severing Mundane tiers, and there were even a few more that had achieved a flawless severance. However, having a flawless severance was the limit. It was impossible that they could advance to the Severing Mundane tier via the alternative method because of this. In short, there were a total of 272 people that were qualified to attend the celebratory feast of the Fu clan, and each person could bring a partner. The great feast naturally could not be held at the Fu clan residence, that was too far. It was rather going to be hosted in the Sky Mountains outside Moon Scattering City. This was closer to the few cities in the surrounding area, and the Fu clan did not merely want to recruit people under the rule of the Black Moon sect. Ling Han thought that he could go and take a look at the Fu clan residence, and use the resources of the Fu clan to find out the whereabouts of the Rock Palace. Thus, he, the Empress, and the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden rested for a day, and made their way to the Sky Mountains as well. There was a tiny stone door at the foot of the mountains, and at the doorway, there was a large mass of people gathered. Some could enter, and the moment they stepped over the threshold of the stone doors, their whole person immediately disappeared. Realization dawned on Ling Han. This was a spatial god tool. However, there were people standing guard at the doorway, and one would first have to show their invitation card to enter. We don't have an invitation card, how are we supposed to enter? The Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden asked. Chapter 1741, What should be done without an invitation? We'll just go in like that, Ling Han said with a grin. With one arm around each woman, Ling Han squeezed through the crowd, and strode forwards. Underneath their intimidating bearing, those standing in front of them could only step aside to give way. After all, those that were surrounding the stone doors were only Genesis tiers, hadn't Severing Mundane tiers all entered in earlier? Of course, even if they were Severing Mundane tiers, there were not many people that could withstand Ling Han's aura by now. Invitation card. The man standing guard at the doors was a middle-aged man, and his cultivation level as a Severing Mundane tier was enough to suppress all minor characters that wanted to create trouble. As expected of the Fu clan. They were really rich and imposing, even a mere guard was so lavish as they had directly assigned a Severing Mundane ancestor as a mere guard. Ling Han smiled faintly, and said, "We have just come out of the Severing Mundane pool, and have not received any invitation card." The middle-aged man cast a look over Ling Han, his eyes filled with doubt. Just come out? The Severing Mundane pool had already closed, and you just so happened to come out right before it closed? He did not believe it. He thought that Ling Han should have long since broken through to the Severing Mundane tier, and had come here to trick them. Because Fu clan only wanted prodigies, it was natural that they would only welcome those king tiers that had advanced to the Severing Mundane tier in the Severing Mundane pool. Otherwise, if they were merely ordinary Severing Mundane tiers, then what was the point of recruiting them? To waste their resources? Not all those who entered today might be able to board the Fu clan's ship. Only those prodigies that could possibly achieve a flawless severance were going to be targets for the Fu clan. Ho ho, without an invitation card, you had best turn back, the middle-aged man said with a smile, but did not turn Ling Han away with harsh words. This was the bearing of a noble clan. Otherwise, the servants that came from smaller clans would instead be even more arrogant. Ling Han was not angered either, and smilingly said, "Please help us inform Miss Fu Xiaoyun." He even had designs on the exquisite fairy of our Fu clan. The middle-aged man showed a hint of displeasure. Fu Xiaoyun was too outstanding. Advancing into the Severing Mundane tier was only the beginning. In future, her achievement would definitely be at the level of the immortal palace tier, and the only question was whether she could become a big shot among immortal palace tiers. Was she anyone you could have ideas about? What a shameless toad. Sir, if you continue to be a pest, then don't blame me for being rude, the middle-aged man retorted coldly. Have you heard that? Scram! A proud voice rang out from behind them. Everyone turned and looked over. That was a young man, and his expression was completely one of insufferable arrogance. His name was Ning Hao, and he was a rookie that had just advanced into the Severing Mundane tier this time. At first, he could only be an ordinary Severing Mundane tier, but because of the effect of destiny, he had hit a bit of luck. The strike he delivered was very thorough, and he had achieved a flawless severance. This naturally led to him becoming extremely arrogant. What Changsun Liang and Xiao Sheng? Weren't they all the same as he? They had all achieved a flawless severance. Thus, his self-confidence immediately shot sky-high, feeling that he was the strongest prodigy in the present generation. He could tell that both Ling Han and the Empress were Severing Mundane tiers, but so what? They must have achieved Severing Mundane tier in some unknown corner, so how could they compare to him, who had achieved a flawless severance? There was also a woman beside him. She was very beautiful, but was also similarly arrogant. Her slender arm was wrapped around Ning Hao's arm, her chin raised so high that her nostrils were almost facing upwards. Ling Han turned his head, frowned, and said, "Do you know how to speak properly? If you don't, then just shut your damn mouth." This. When everyone heard this, they all thought that Ling Han was very aggressive. Though Ning Hao was very arrogant, Ling Han was not going to appear polite either, immediately throwing an insult his way. But it was true, how could anyone being told to scram for no reason feel satisfied? You are courting death. Ning Hao's eyes turned cold, but when his eyes swept over the Empress and the heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden, he couldn't help but show a cold smirk, and said, "These two beauties, do you want to attend the Fu clan's banquet? That would be simple, as long as you two dump that guy, I will take the two of you in." "Brother Hao, then what about me?" The woman beside him immediately leaped up. According to the rules, every guest could only bring a single companion. Ning Hao sneered, and withdrew his arm from her grasp. He coldly retorted, "You can scram now." This kind of woman was only good enough for playing around. Could it be that she expected to become a phoenix by taking advantage of her connection with him? The woman only looked despondent for a while before immediately shrieking, "Ning Hao, how dare you? You are really heartless after you have had your way with me. You will definitely get your just desserts." Ning Hao's expression darkened, and showed killing intent. This woman actually dared to announce the matters between them in public, and actually dared to speak of it in such a crude manner. Get lost. The Empress was furious. Shua, she delivered a palm strike in Ning Hao's direction. Boom, the palm that was akin to white jade swept out, her origin power taking the form of a fine small hand that slapped out towards Ning Hao's face. Ling Han couldn't help but nod. The Empress's control over her power had already reached a very fine level. Though elites would form a giant hand at the slightest inclination, this was because their power was too strong, and after their origin power took form, it naturally would be even bigger and very simple. But to control the size of the hand that had been formed from her origin power to a very small size would require her grasp and control over her own power to reach a very high level. After advancing into the Severing Mundane tier, the Empress had finally succeeded. A light tap was actually a harsh blow. Ning Hao scoffed. "I only gave you a chance because you have quite a good figure, yet you have forgotten yourself in your arrogance." He, too, sent out a palm strike, which turned into the size of at least a house, greeting the Empress's incoming blow. Just look, this was what true power was, the mighty power that only a flawless severance could possess. Boom, this palm strike of his caused a clap of thunder. A Severing Mundane ancestor was naturally strong, their regulations glowing, and possessing a supreme aura that mortals could only worship. The Empress threw out a palm strike. Her tiny, jade-like palm sank into the giant hand, just like a grain of rice thrown into the water, completely negligible and without the slightest effect. Yet that was only for an instant. The large hand outside suddenly crumbled, and the regulations also dispersed completely at the first moment. That fine small hand appeared once more, pressing down on Ning Hao, completely unaffected. Instantly, Ning Hao's face turned pale. Their palms clashed, but the strength of his palm strike completely crumbled, yet the power of his opponent seemed to be completely unaffected. What justice was in that? Just how wide did the gap of power have to be between them to lead to such a situation? Pang! He had not finished the thought when he was already sent flying by a palm strike, passing out directly. Tui! The woman from before walked over and spat at him. Only then did she strode off. Ling Han didn't even bother to look. The Empress was capable of being a king tier even in the second severance, so what was there to be shocked about her managing to toss over such trash? He directed a smile at the middle-aged man, and said, "Just help me out here." The middle-aged man was already dumbfounded. He was also a first severance, and naturally knew that Ning Hao was not artificially strong, and his strength was considerably powerful. But even so, he had still been directly struck like an idiot by a single palm strike. He hurriedly changed his attitude, and said, "3 guests, this way please." They should not have been lying, and had indeed come out of the severing mundane pool. Otherwise, if they hadn't advanced into severing mundane tier there, how could their strength possibly be this strong? Ling Han nodded at him, and the 3 of them walked through the stone doors together. Suddenly, the scene in front of their eyes immediately changed. They had entered into a colossal space, which contained mountains and water bodies, just like a small world. Merely with a few looks, Ling Han was sure that this definitely was a spatial god tool that had been directly refined based on a small world. So rich. 3 guests, this way please. Someone was waiting for them respectfully inside, and seeing Ling Han and his group appear, immediately extended his hand to show them the way in. Ling Han and his group followed behind him. Very soon, another person took that man's place, continuing to receive the guests that entered. This really was a small world. The power of regulation was too weak, and though the people that were guiding them in were only in the Genesis tier, they could travel a few million miles in a single step. In just 2 or 3 steps, they were already led to the front of a dazzling palace. 3 guests, the banquet will be held in the palace, so please go on ahead on your own. The person turned back. He still had to continue his work to guide new guests. Ling Han was just about to walk forwards when he suddenly took a sniff, and turned towards a row of courtyards at the side of the palace instead. Chapter 1742, Assisting in Pill Concoction. What drew Ling Han over was a herbal aroma. As the alchemy emperor, he might not be considered an elite of alchemy at this moment, but was definitely at the level of a prodigy. He could detect the slightest smell, and be able to track it down. This was a celestial pill. At first, he had only come here to have some food and drinks. Ling Han himself did not have much interest, but there was actually someone concocting a pill in this place, and this garnered his curiosity, and he wanted to meet the person who was concocting a pill. Now that he had advanced into the severing mundane tier, he was qualified to refine celestial pills. The Empress was proud, and thought that all beings in this world should become subjects for herself and Ling Han. Even if they did not offer their allegiance now, they would do so in future. Thus, she naturally was completely unconcerned that Ling Han would be barging around carelessly like this. In her eyes, this was only to be expected. The heavenly phoenix divine maiden was slightly anxious, though. After all, this was the territory of the Fu clan, and who knew how many elites were hidden here in this small world. Ling Han pushed open all the doors he came across and entered. This courtyard was extremely quiet, so peaceful that there weren't even any patrolling teams. But true, this was a spatial god tool in the first place. Usually, no one would be entering at all, so what need was there to deliberately assign guards? And at present, everyone was heading towards that palace, who would become interested in this completely unremarkable courtyard? Finally, Ling Han arrived at a massive room. It was very spacious, and there was a cauldron right in its center. The cauldron was 30 meters tall, and it did not look like a cauldron at all, but rather a tower. Underneath the cauldron, flames blazed. An elder was presently circling continuously around the cauldron. For every circle he made, he would deliver a palm strike. The regulation of fire surged, and the cauldron would also react, multiple patterns appearing. This elder ignored Ling Han and his group completely. His figure circled around quickly like a ghost. Ling Han frowned, and exclaimed, "Oh no, it's going to be ruined." When his words fell, the elder's steps also slowed, and there were beads of sweat rolling down his forehead. The whole cauldron was also shaking slightly as if it was about to explode. "Hurry and give me a hand," the elder immediately called out. How was he supposed to help? Though Ling Han was a prodigy of alchemy, he had never concocted a celestial pill before, so how was he to know how a celestial pill should be concocted? However, being able to lay claim to the name of Alchemy Emperor, Ling Han naturally was no fake. It was all right even if he did not know how to go about refining a celestial pill. He only had to understand the movements of that elder. In the end, pill refinement meant the grasp and control one had over flames. Of course, pharmacology was also very important, but at present, it had no relation to Ling Han. The changes of the cauldron's fire would determine whether the pill would explode or otherwise. At present, it was the problem of a possibility of the cauldron exploding, and thus this was something that Ling Han could handle. After only taking a few looks, he immediately moved. Pa, pa, pa. He continued to strike the cauldron endlessly, the 9 heavens flame surging. This was the source of his confidence in daring to make a move. At the beginning, his movements were slightly hesitant, but he immediately became proficient. Every single move showed his knowledge of the fundamentals. This was the comprehension ability of the Alchemy Emperor. Of course, he presently could only follow the elder's movements. If the elder was not leading the way in front of him, he definitely would not be able to follow up. The elder was very busy. Not only did he have to adjust the temperature of the flame, he had to weave together the medicinal traits of the ingredients at the same time. If he was all by himself, he would really be slightly strained. However, with Ling Han's help now in controlling the temperature of the flames, he would be able to split out a portion of his concentration to soothe those medicinal ingredients that were about to turn violent. Both of them, young and old, were focused, and the Empress and the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden waited on the sidelines quietly. They only had to see Ling Han's completely concentrated expression, and they would not have the slightest feeling of impatience. And in this process, half a day's time had passed. Pa, pa, pa. The elder struck 72 times successively, and a whirring tremor was immediately emitted from the cauldron. The cauldron's flames extinguished in an instant. Ha ha ha. The elder laughed loudly, his beard shaking. 3 billion years, 3 billion years, and I have finally refined the winds and fire's 9 clouds pill successfully. Old geezer Situ, I have finally surpassed you this time. Let's see what else you have to say, just obediently bow your head in submission in front of me. He laughed for a while, and then turned towards Ling Han. His expression involuntarily became strange. Who are you? Ling Han was amused, and said, You don't even know who I am, and you dared to have me help you? The elder suddenly gaped, and looked completely astonished. I thought you were a helper that girl sent over, could it be that you're not? What girl? Ling Han shook his head. I'm not. The elder scratched his head, but then laughed. This is a fortunate misunderstanding, I finally concocted the winds and fire's 9 clouds pill. Brat, you have no idea how difficult it is to concoct this pill. Let me explain it to you. This dilemma had troubled him for 1.3 billion years, and now that it had finally been resolved successfully, the elder was naturally extremely ecstatic. Tugging Ling Han's hand, and not caring whether he was interested or not, he began to blabber on and on. As it turned out, this was an ancient pill recipe. Because it was too old, it was not very complete. When he had gotten hold of it, he tried various methods to restore it. 500 million years ago, he had already confirmed this current pill recipe, but was not able to successfully concoct it before no matter what he tried. His name was Xiang Yan, and there was another person that was restoring this pill recipe alongside him, Situ Tang. Both of them were originally good friends, but because they had a difference of opinion regarding the restoration of this ancient pill recipe, they had a few arguments, and a grudge began to grow between them. They each went their separate ways, both hoping that they could succeed, then show off in front of the other person, and enjoy the pleasure of watching the other person yielding and admitting that they were wrong in front of them. It had to be admitted that this was very childish, but if they were not such weirdos, how could they possibly spend a few 100 million to a few billion years' time on alchemy? Xiang Yan was very excited. He actually explained every detail of the restored pill recipe to Ling Han. This kind of alchemical pill was used to heal injuries, and was very effective even for immortal palace tier elites. Thus, now that this pill recipe had been successfully restored, its significance was incredibly important. He would even be written down in history, and become a god to the innumerable alchemists in the future generations. And in this manner, Ling Han learnt a new pill recipe completely, and this was also his first celestial level pill recipe, which was incredibly valuable. Seeing Xiang Yan was still blabbing endlessly there, seeming like he was completely capable of boasting for the rest of his life, Ling Han hurriedly called a halt, and dragging the 2 women with him, left like he was fleeing from something. Though Xiang Yan chased him for a few steps, he immediately ran back happily. At present, this cauldron was his treasure, and he feared that if he left, the alchemical pill would be stolen. Ling Han and his group exited the courtyard, and turned towards that palace. At this moment, the banquet had already begun, and the sound of music could be heard. What was strange was that the actual banquet was not actually held within the palace. In fact, this could not be considered a banquet in the traditional sense of the word, because there weren't multiple tables which people gathered around. Instead, at least 100 tables were joined together to form a long line, and various dishes were laid out on top. The guests held plates, and they would help themselves to whatever food piqued their fancy. There were plates at the side of each table, and one would occasionally see attendants replenishing those dishes that had been emptied. This was quite interesting. Every single person held a plate. Some would be eating as they walked, and some would be gathered in small groups, conversing as they ate. At the side, there were musicians that were playing various musical instruments, and there were also beautiful women dancing elegantly. Ling Han said, "You guys find a place to wait, I'll go get us some food." Chapter 1743, Carrying off the whole pot. The Empress and the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden both nodded. Ling Han, meanwhile, strode forwards, and arrived at the side of that long line of tables. He drew out a plate, and began filling it with food without reservations. Others would be eating a little and taking a little, but with a glutton like him, this clearly was not possible. He filled the plate completely with food, and then arranged it into a tall pile. With his strength, he naturally could ensure that the food would be piled up like a small hill without the slightest bit falling off. At the side, some people were watching him with disdain. "Just how long have you gone without food? Do you have to take so much food like this?" Ling Han naturally would not be concerned with them. In the circle of cultivators, prestige was not given to you by others, but was rather gained through fighting with your own fists. Whoever was not convinced, he only had to beat them into submission. "Brother Lu, look. What corner has this country bumpkin popped out of? He's acting as if others will be snatching food from him. A woman was watching him coldly, her expression filled with mockery. She wore a red dress, and was quite beautiful, definitely being qualified to be considered a beautiful woman. Her companion was a man with a wide build. He was also presently watching Ling Han with disdain, and he said, it should be his first time attending such an event. He must have never seen such high-grade food before, and so revealed his true nature. What poor manners, the woman said with disdain. She was only a Genesis tier, but because she had partnered with a newly advanced Severing Mundane tier, she actually dared to treat a genuine Severing Mundane tier like Ling Han in such a disdainful manner. Ling Han ignored her. The dishes offered at this banquet were really quite high-grade foods. There was a considerable amount of Genesis tier-level demonic beast meat, as well as some level 19 and 20 saint fruits. Every single item would be worth a few star stones outside, which was still relatively expensive. His eyes were sharp, and he chose all the good stuff, causing this couple that was behind him to almost die of fury because as long as they took food after Ling Han had had his pick, all the good stuff in the dish would be completely gone. At first, they were still very reserved and followed behind Ling Han, but after a small semicircle, their faces were completely dark. That was because the contents of Ling Han's plate were already 21 to 24 meters tall. He had taken all the high-grade food and fruits, and those left behind were all lower-grade stuff. The couple could do nothing, and could only cut in front of Ling Han. Otherwise, they really wouldn't be able to get anything good. Ling Han couldn't help but laugh secretly. He had done it on purpose. He was just planning to return to the two women, but saw an attendant walking over, carrying a small dish. And when he passed by, he could see that a great many people were staring at him. They all stood up, and followed him. Could it be that some high-grade stuff had been served again? Ling Han saw that he was heading right in his direction, and thus chose to stop and wait for him. He saw that the attendant had placed down a clay pot, which had not been opened yet, but strains of steam could clearly be seen rising from the slit between the pot and its lid, turning into multiple patterns of great Tao. "TSK, good stuff," the attendant announced. "Celestial Cloud's mother ginseng stewed with phoenix blood chicken. Please enjoy, esteemed guests." This was a celestial medicine matched with an immortal beast. Of course, the Celestial Cloud's mother ginseng was only a one-star celestial medicine that was at the lowest tier, but for the first severance and second severance, it was indescribably nutritious. And the phoenix blood chicken should also only be in the Severing Mundane tier, but cooked together with the celestial medicine, the effects of both could be strengthened to a certain extent. No wonder this dish had gathered everyone's attention the moment it was taken out. Most likely, it had been announced that this dish would be there, and they had all been waiting. In this mere instant, a long line had formed behind Ling Han. Just how much chicken meat and ginseng could there be in this small clay pot? If they did not line up earlier, they wouldn't be able to drink even a little soup. That couple that had previously mocked Ling Han were also very close, and so lined up behind Ling Han, just waiting for him to leave so they could feast to their heart's content. Ling Han naturally would not be reserved. He stretched out his hands, and directly picked up this clay pot. Then, he walked off just like that. Walked off, walked off, walked off. Stop right there. That couple bared their fangs at him. You fuck are really not the slightest bit reserved. That is a whole pot of soup that contained a celestial medicine and immortal beast meat, and you actually carried off the whole pot? What is it? Ling Han turned back around, his face bearing an amiable smile. If the large black dog was here, its eyes would definitely turn around, and it would say, "Little Han, you are up to mischief again." "Put down the pot," they exclaimed harshly. Though they did not want to create trouble in such a high-grade banquet either, Ling Han was really too tasteless. Was there anyone that would do the same thing you did, leaving others cold and hungry? In this great banquet, all the other foods added together would not match 1/10 of the value of this single soup. They had waited for who knew how long. Did you think that they had been circling around the tables all this while because they could refill their plates easily after they had finished eating? Wrong, they had all been waiting for this dish to be served. They were only too embarrassed to be too obvious, and feared that others would laugh at them. But now, Ling Han was actually carrying off the whole pot of celestial soup, so they naturally did not want their pride anymore. Why? Ling Han's expression was completely innocent. You can't carry off the whole pot of soup on your own, that couple called out, and those lining up behind them nodded quickly as well. You couldn't do that. Isn't it just a pot of soup? Could it be that you all haven't drunk soup before? Why are you all so frantic like this? Ling Han asked, putting on a pretense of surprise. Just a pot of soup? Was this any ordinary soup? It was made from a celestial medicine cooked with the meat of an immortal beast, and was incredibly valuable. Those from one-star forces would not have a chance of tasting such high-grade food at all, and even such prodigies from two-star forces like Changsun Liang, Xiaofan, and the others would only have the chance to drink a mouthful when they attended such major events like the birthday celebrations of their grand elders. They naturally were frantic. Put down the pot, the red-attired woman shrieked, her expression completely twisted. She longed to drink a few more mouthfuls of soup made from a celestial medicine and meat of an immortal beast. It would allow her to gain the chance of breaking through into the severing mundane tier. For cultivators, this was a temptation that could not be refused, and was also their greatest life goal. Ling Han grinned, and said, "Sure, if you guys can take it, then just go ahead." He indeed put the pot down, but did not walk away. The couple immediately walked over, and stretched out a hand to lift the pot's lid. But their hands had just touched the lid, and they shouted in pain. They hurriedly let go, and took a few steps back. When they looked at their raised hands, the hands that they had stretched out were already as swollen as a pig's trotter, the surface of the skin having turned red. What's going on? The people who were at the back were uncertain of the situation, and all felt curious. Some had already become guarded, not daring to act rashly. Others, seeing that couple had stepped out of the way, all rushed forwards. It would be great if they made it there sooner, and gained a few extra mouthfuls of soup. However, whoever touched the lid of the pot would come off worse. Some had learned their lesson, and used something else to grip onto the pot's lid, but they were still scalded badly. There was not a single person that managed to take off the pot's lid, what more drink some soup. After a dozen or so people, everyone looked at Ling Han with amazed, uncertain eyes. They could all guess that this was Ling Han's doing, but no one could say clearly what exactly he had done. They had all gained a healthy respect, and some had already guessed that Ling Han's strength might be extremely frightening, so they did not dare make any more attempts, and turned around and left. Ling Han chuckled, and picked up the pot again. He withdrew the 9 heavens flame, and began to search for the Empress and the heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden. As he swept his gaze over the surroundings, he spotted the Empress and the heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden. However, they were presently surrounded by over a dozen men, and looking at the expressions of those men, they should all be wooing the 2 women at present. This was not unusual. The Empress did not even need to show her true face, merely that perfect figure and captivating bearing was enough to make any man fall for her, and now that she had advanced into the severing mundane tier, who did not want to possess such a partner? "Brother, how are you going to court women like this?" When Ling Han came closer, a man immediately pulled him over, pointing at the food that was piled up like a small hill in his hands. Chapter 1744, Women Should Be Courted Like This. Ling Han turned to see a young man dressed in black tight-fitting outfit. He smiled, and asked, "Oh, then how should women be courted? In short, you definitely can't do it like this. What beautiful woman would like a glutton?" The young man in black scoffed. Ling Han felt mischievous, and asked, "How should I address you, my friend?" Splendid distant city, Kuing, the young man in black replied. Ling Han nodded, and said, Ku Zi, let us make a wager, shall we? Ku Zi. Ku Ying's whole face was dark. Your skill at inventing nicknames is really too poor. Furthermore, since it is so poor, how can you simply blurt it out like that? Instantly, he was displeased, and retorted, what wager? I am going to use this food to court those 2 women, and you will have to call me Big Brother in future, Ling Han said, grinning. Ku Ying humphed, and replied, fine, but if you can't. Then I won't call you Ku Zi, I'll call you Ku Tu instead, Ling Han quipped. Fuck you. Ku Ying did not know what was up either. In just a few moments, his anger was spiked with Ling Han's words. He darkly retorted, if you can't, then you will have to call me Lord Ku in future. Some people nearby heard their wager, and involuntarily became excited as well. They all exclaimed, count me in too. Young people were fond of playing around, after all. Furthermore, this wager was clearly a sure win. These 2 women, especially that veiled woman, had a perfect figure, and her demeanor was so noble that others did not dare approach. How could they possibly be gluttons? Even if they were, everyone could take the food here. If you managed to court them with such a simple means, what justice would there be left in this world? Too bad, no one noticed that Ling Han had actually come in together with the 2 women. If they had witnessed this scene, then it was definite that no one would have dared make such a wager. Hey, let's be clear first, we're talking about those 2 women, someone immediately added. Since one of the 2 women was a Genesis tier, then a severing mundane tier only had to crook a finger, and the possibility that she would throw herself into his arms was too high. There was no lack of materialistic women that wanted to form connections above their station in this world. Right, it is either that veiled woman, or courting the 2 of them together, the others egged him on. Ling Han deliberately frowned, and said, can the difficulty level not be so high? I am still a rookie. It has to be. Everyone was excited now. This banquet was only about eating and drinking, and it felt very boring. Fine then. Ling Han nodded reluctantly. He pushed aside those men that were still making pointless efforts ahead of him, and asked, 2 beautiful women, do you want to have some immortal beast meat? Sure, the 2 women replied, all smiles. Fuck, what was going on here? Were these 2 beauties both gluttons? Why did their expressions change immediately upon hearing of food? Just now, they kept up a cool, aloof attitude towards whoever wanted to strike up a conversation with them. If they weren't gluttons, why would they switch their attitudes so drastically and so quickly? If you want to eat, there is a condition, Ling Han said slowly. What condition? The 2 women naturally cooperated. You have to give me a kiss. All right. The 2 women approached, each planting a kiss on either side of Ling Han's cheeks. Those watching from the side were all dumbfounded. So as it turned out, courting women was actually so easy. Ling Han opened the claypot. This was a celestial soup, and it would really help too much to increase their present cultivation level. He took out bowls, and filled one for each woman. The heavenly phoenix divine maiden could only drink the soup. She had yet to advance into the severing mundane tier, so if she directly consumed the meat and the celestial medicine, the possibility of her exploding from being overnourished was higher. The Empress also required nutrition indeed. Previously, when she had advanced into the severing mundane tier, she had expended quite a few doppelgangers. Though she could reform them, it was very taxing for her, and this pot of soup was really timely help. At first, Ling Han would not have gone so far, but his wife was most important to him, so he naturally could not be reserved. Ling Han turned back around, and directed a smile at the others, declaring, "Call me Big Brother." Big Brother. The others were all convinced. Then, they quickly turned around and ran. They, too, wanted to get some celestial soup, and come back to court these 2 women. Ling Han laughed loudly, while the heavenly phoenix divine maiden shook her head. This husband of hers was really like a child sometimes, rendering others completely speechless. The Empress, though, was completely unconcerned. As long as Ling Han liked it, she was in full support. However, because Ling Han had carried off the whole pot of soup, a great many people had expressed their complaints to Fu Xiaoyun. In the end, Fu Xiaoyun had no choice but to command that another pot be cooked. After all, this banquet was for the purpose of recruiting new members. How could they expect the horse to run on an empty stomach? When the second pot of celestial soup was taken out, multiple people all bore twisted expressions, immediately coming to blows. Those had all been tricked by Ling Han, thinking that carrying a pot of celestial soup over would allow them to court an exquisite beauty the likes of the Empress. For the sake of the Empress, they naturally would give it their all. These were all young people, and were very quick-tempered. Soon enough, their true anger was spiked. Pang, pang, pang. Immediately, it became complete chaos. Wives, just look. Ling Han first pulled the two women to one side. Then, he covered his face, and charged into the battle royale. In a moment, he had come back out, his hands holding a clay pot. What was it if not the celestial soup? He and the Empress both dined delectably. Meanwhile, the heavenly phoenix divine maiden could not eat it anymore. She was already at the peak stage of the Genesis tier in the first place, and if she could not advance into the severing mundane tier, she could only endlessly increase the number of her stars. The great battle persisted for a very long time, and it was Bei Xuanming who interfered personally. Only then were the masses suppressed. A second Severance King tier was naturally awesome. His expression was dark, and he shouted questions at the crowd. To actually dare begin a gang fight in the Fu clan's great banquet, were they tired of living? Someone discovered that the celestial soup had disappeared, and immediately shrieked, "Where's the soup?" When everyone saw this, they all moaned in despair. They had become a complete mess, and wasn't it just for the sake of that pot of celestial soup? Now, it had actually disappeared without a trace. How could they not grieve like this? Ling Han drank the soup happily, and did not feel the slightest bit of guilt. Husband, it seems like everywhere you go, there is no place that can remain peaceful, and people definitely would end up in a tizzy, the heavenly phoenix divine maiden assessed. Ling Han thought for a moment, that was indeed the case. None of the mystery realms he entered were ordinary. Just look, he had discovered the body of a celestial king even in the severing mundane pool, and also obtained the source water or heaven and earth and a core secret technique of a celestial king. And when he went to Dark Moon City after he had entered the celestial realm, the ancestral shrine of the Ding clan was torn apart. When he went to Black Moon City, the Shao clan ended up fuming with rage. Strange, he had never thought of going to create trouble, but it just happened that everything would occur around him. With his personality, he was not one that was willing to suffer silently either, so a small issue would slowly and eventually grow to become a big matter. On the other side, Bei Xuanming was again rebuking with a few strict words. Fu Xiaoyun stepped out, and said, "Next, there is a small test. Those who successfully pass the test may join the Fu clan, and our Fu clan also has an agreement with the Return to Origin Palace to nominate promising candidates to join this 4-star force." She paused. True enough, she saw that everyone's eyes had lit up. Only then did she continue, "I hope that everyone can grasp this opportunity." The masses were excited. Putting aside Return to Origin Palace, merely being able to enter the Fu clan was a supreme honor. For a mere first severance, a 3-star force would be akin to the bright moon in the skies, something so far off that it could not be reached. Dare I ask, Fairy Fu, what is this test like? Chapter 1745, Take a Saber Attack from Me. Later, we will head to a forest, and what everyone has to do is actually very simple. In 10 days' time, pass over the mountains, and reach the other side, Fu Xiaoyun said. Her description sounded very simple, but everyone looked grave. If it was so easy to join the Fu clan, then would it still be considered a 3-star force? But Fu Xiaoyun was only willing to say so much at this point, and they could not force her to answer their questions either. They could only keep their doubts in their hearts. In any case, they would find out when they arrived at the destination. Everyone left the area of the palace, and headed all the way north. The power of regulation in a small world was really too weak. The spatial barrier seemed to be non-existent. In only a few steps, they had already traversed many mountains and rivers. Ahead of them was a mountain as tall as 30,000 meters, and its length was in tens of thousands of meters. But wasn't this kind of tall mountain just the issue of a single step for a first severance elite? Everyone, please take this piece of paper. When you all arrive at the summit later, you have to ask a person there to place a stamp on your paper, Fu Xiaoyun said. If the person has arrived without a stamp, then it cannot be considered as having passed the test. Everyone exchanged looks. Could it be that the difficulty lay in obtaining this stamp? Fu Xiaoyun continued, everyone, the path of cultivation is cruel. Everyone should first take their own measures to avoid losing their life in this place. Hearing these words, everyone's expressions finally changed. There was actually a possibility of losing one's life in this small test. Those who do not want to take the risk do not have to participate in the test, but those who ascend the mountain are responsible for their own lives, Fu Xiaoyun stated calmly. If there's no other question, then let's begin. Only after a slight hesitation did a great many people charge out. Wasn't the life of a cultivator all about fighting with the heaven and earth and with others? If they took this gamble, there was a chance they could join the Fu clan. Then, their future would be bright. Otherwise, if they remained in a 1-star force, so what if they could live for a few hundreds of billions of years? In the end, they would not be able to survive the immortals' tribulation, and would still be killed sooner or later. Everyone ran out, while the companions that those severing mundane tier elites had brought stayed behind. Ling Han drew the heavenly phoenix divine maiden into the Black Tower, and then slowly ascended the mountain with the Empress. Fu Xiaoyun said that they only needed a stamp, and then head to the other side of the mountain. There was no rule that said that they had to definitely get the top few positions. Thus, the two of them naturally had no need to rush the journey. When they had taken a few steps, they couldn't help but be slightly surprised, because the suppression over their speed was overwhelming. Usually, this was refined based on a small world, and the power of regulation was too weak here, so it was completely impossible to bind a severing mundane tier. But on this mountain, it was completely different. In fact, the power of regulation here was even stronger than in the celestial realm, causing their speed to drop to the extent of being 100 times faster than an ordinary person, at most. To a first severance elite, this was overwhelmingly slow. What powerful gravity! Moreover, the air is also very sticky and filled with some substance, being like a swamp, which further restricts speed, Ling Han analyzed. However, if he used the lightning flash, he could attain a burst of rapid speed. The Empress nodded, but was not afraid at all. The Fu clan had set this kind of test to recruit talented people, not to kill them. Thus, this test had to be something that a flawless severance could pass, but both Ling Han and the Empress had advanced into the severing mundane tier successfully through striking the heaven and earth, so their first severance was capable of crushing even second severance, so wasn't passing this test something very simple for them? As the two of them continued walking, they discussed the art of cultivation. Ling Han taught the secret technique of the multitude beasts celestial king to the Empress. He was very expectant. If every single doppelganger of the Empress could produce 10 battle beasts, then when the Empress exchanged blows with others in future, she could summon her 9 doppelgangers and 100 battle beasts. This lineup was slightly frightening. Both of them were prodigies of cultivation. Though a celestial king technique was incredibly difficult to grasp and understand, as they discussed, they still picked out a single thread out of this whole mess, and gained some ideas. They both had a slight understanding, but compared with the true celestial king technique, this was only the tip of the iceberg. Halt! They were just talking when they saw a person suddenly appear in front of them. Dressed in a tight-fitting outfit, he appeared to be a guard, wielding a saber in his hand. "If you wish to advance, you must take a saber strike from me." Ling Han asked, "Then what if we can't take it?" "Then everything will be up to fate." This man paused, and continued, "I will try my best to hold my punches, and not kill the two of you." Oh, no wonder Fu Xiaoyun had added a word of advice. So this was what was going on here. Ling Han broke into a grin, and asked, "Can I take the offensive instead?" The man paused, then laughed loudly, and said, "You are the seventh person to ask me this question. Not bad, not bad. Very smart. You can take the offensive, but if you took the offensive, your defenses would be greatly decreased when I strike. The possibility of being able to take this saber strike from me would be even smaller then. You are a second severance, right?" Ling Han suddenly asked. The man did not feel that it was strange that he was seen through, and said, "That's right, I am a second severance. However, you do not have to worry. I will not use my full strength, and will limit my strength to the level of first severance. As long as you are an ordinary severance, you will at least be able to retreat safely under this saber strike of mine." Ling Han smiled, and said, "I am not worried, but you had best worry a bit." "Worry about what?" the man asked curiously. The Empress suddenly moved, and shot out a palm strike at the man. Boom, suns, moons, and stars appeared in the palm of her hand, with multiple streaks of great Tao appearing, and the power of regulation rippling, like the descent of a supreme empress. The man paled in shock. Instinctively, he was about to brandish his saber in a parry, but a hint of hesitation immediately appeared in his expression. He was afraid that if attack clashed with attack, he would die. This strike was extremely devastating. After only an instant of hesitation, he gave up the idea of parrying. Instead, he held his saber over his chest, and activated it fully. He wanted to first block this attack, and then take advantage of the opening for a counterattack. Pang! The Empress's palm strike landed onto the blade of the saber, and a clear palm print actually appeared on the blade. An irresistible force rolled over, and the man retreated continuously. His face had become pallid, and then became completely red. Then, he began to throw up blood like mad. "Worry about this." Ling Han finally finished his words. Though that man was a second severance, he was only a minor guard of the Fu clan, so how could he possibly be a king tier? And the Empress's battle prowess could rule even in the second severance, and only the likes of Bei Xuanming could possibly be a match for her. This man was still a long way off from that. He was defeated with a single move. The man looked at the Empress with eyes full of disbelief. Who could believe that a first severance was actually capable of defeating a second severance so easily? If it was not for the fact that he was personally involved, he would completely treat it as a joke that was not funny at all should he hear it from others. Ling Han chuckled, and said, "It's my turn now, right?" The man forcibly stood back up. Though it was already a complete mess inside his chest, he suppressed his injury. He was sure that with his cultivation level as a second severance, he was capable of completing the test for a first severance even with severe injuries. "My husband is stronger than I am." The Empress suddenly spoke up. These words were spoken with a very even tone, having completely no intention of showing off. She was only stating a very ordinary fact. Meanwhile, the man shivered from the scare. With a ding, the saber in his hand fell onto the floor. He had no wish to die at such a young age. Chapter 1746, Who is the one being tested? Ling Han and the Empress easily passed the first test, and that saber-wielding man's legs were still shaking behind them. How could there be such a freakish couple? He was a second severance here, and a second severance Grand Elder was actually so scared by a first severance junior that he dropped his saber. This was proof of just how frightening this couple was. He had best never see them ever again. Ling Han and the Empress continued to discuss the 10 beasts technique of the multitude beasts celestial king. Ling Han did not obtain the complete celestial technique, but there was nothing lacking in the core secret of the technique, and only the core part of forming 10 battle beasts was good enough for them to consider it to be of value. Who among them had not cultivated a celestial king technique? The two of them sipped reincarnation tea as they continued their discussion, and when they felt an urge, they would even spar a bit. They were completely unconcerned what speed they were walking at. However, half a day later, they had finally arrived at the second testing area. There was a large number of people gathered here, but they were actually not fighting, but rather playing chess. The game of Go. Ling Han only swept an eye over the board, and discovered that this was not ordinary Go. The black and white pieces seemed to have a life of their own, all exuding a boundless killing intent. As each move was made and each piece was consumed, the killing intent would wash out. Those who had weak willpower would even break down if they watched this game. One side of the clash was a young man, probably a first severance prodigy that had risen above the masses this time, and the other side was an elder dressed in long grey robes. The latter's face was covered with wrinkles, and his hair was completely white. But this elder was a second severance. Ling Han was slightly surprised. He had initially thought that this spatial god tool was only Fu Xiaoyun's temporary residence, but from the looks of things now, that wasn't the case. If it was only a temporary residence, how could there possibly be a celestial-level alchemist and at least 2 second severance elites? Fu Xiaoyun had probably deliberately brought it along with her to allow her to easily recruit people like them. Otherwise, if it was any other time, this kind of spatial god tool would definitely be stored in the Fu clan manor. Putting all else aside, merely the winds and fire's 9 clouds pill that Xiang Yan had refined was enough to make even immortal palace-tier great elites come to blows for its sake. Pooh! Just at this moment, that young man that was playing suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood, his expression becoming very spiritless. Yet he still asked the elder, "How long did I manage?" 15 minutes, the grey-robed elder stated calmly. He shook his head. Too bad, you did not pass. Ling Han made some inquiries, and found out that they were required to play against this elder. If they could hold on for 30 minutes, they would pass the test, but if they were unable to, they could only go back the way they came. Who's next? The grey-robed elder swept an eye over the crowd. Some people immediately shook their heads. There was no specific rule that said that they definitely had to walk this path. They could take any other path up the mountain. They only had to obtain a stamp, and reach the other side of the mountain. The grey-robed elder did not stop them, but a cold smirk curled his lips. These people naturally would not know that if they passed each test, they would not face any fatal danger even if they failed, but if they diverted from the main path, it would be incredibly dangerous. Putting aside first severance, even second severance, third severance, and fourth severance could possibly die here. He was not going to reveal the truth, and would only watch coldly from the sidelines. More and more people left. They had already watched a considerable number of people play against the elder, and they had all failed to last a full 30 minutes in the game. Spitting out blood and sustaining injuries, their condition was very serious. Ling Han flopped down, and said, "Uncle, I'll play a game with you." The grey-robed elder slipped all the pieces on the board into the chess case with a flutter of his robes. He said, "You'll take black and move first." Ling Han was not reserved. He took a random black piece, and placed it on the board. The elder naturally could only use the white pieces, and quickly made his move as well. After a few times, Ling Han's moves were still very quick, but the elder was becoming slower and slower. This was not an ordinary game of Go. Instead, the chessboard was akin to a battlefield, and the chess pieces were soldiers, and a different kind of war was being conducted here. They were competing with their divine sense, as well as their grasp over regulations. A first severance naturally could not match a second severance. Thus, the elder placed a time limit of 30 minutes, and anyone who could last the full 30 minutes would be considered as having passed the test. But Ling Han was no ordinary first severance. In terms of grasp of regulations, he possessed the two deadly weapons, the Nine Heavens Flame and the Xianin Source Water. How could they be anything that a second severance could defend against? With the chess pieces as the medium, the Nine Heavens Flame and the Xianin Source Water launched a frightening offensive against the grey-robed elder. How could he block this attack? The elder naturally could only retreat continuously, his moves completely out of order. Very soon, Ling Han's chess pieces consumed his pieces one after another. Not even 15 minutes had passed, and the elder could only abandon the game and forfeit. He looked at Ling Han in shock. Who was the one being tested here? As an examiner, he actually lost to a candidate. Furthermore, it was a horrible, crushing defeat, he did not dare believe it. You have passed, the elder said miserably. He was very proud of his skill in chess, and had thus come up with this method as a test. He had never thought that he would take such a great fall here. Ling Han walked onwards, holding the Empress's hand. The elder initially wanted to stop him. This was not adhering to the rules, but when he recalled how he had lost at Ling Han's hands, how could he bring himself to speak up? He had just raised his hand, and then immediately lowered it. The others were all unconvinced, and raised their objections. If you people are able to defeat me, you can also bring someone with you. You can even bring a few people, the grey-robed elder said, immediately overriding everyone's objections. Ling Han and the Empress were still slowly and leisurely ascending the mountain. Another half a day later, they were already very close to the summit, and the third test appeared in front of them. There was still a large group of people gathered here. When they came close enough, they found out that this third test was not a test of battle prowess or a test of one's grasp of regulations. Instead, you were given a piece of paper. An incomplete seal was written on it, and you had to complete the seal as best as you could. This was very difficult. For the majority of cultivators, including many young king tiers, their comprehension ability was high and battle prowess was strong, but they had all been following in the footsteps of their predecessors from start to finish. Thus, it was extremely difficult to ask them to fill in the blanks for an incomplete seal. Ling Han saw that both Ma Ying and Song Ji were trapped here. The two of them were racking their brains, neither daring to rashly return the piece of paper in their hands. There was only one chance. If they were overly wrong, they would lose the chance to continue onwards. Of course, you could also take a separate path, but that would be extremely dangerous. If you could manage to make your way to the mountain summit even like this, then the Fu clan would also be willing to recruit you just for the sake of your battle prowess and good luck. Ling Han and the Empress walked over, each taking a piece of paper as well. There was a seal written on it, and there were a few crucial points that had been left blank, and they were required to fill it in. There was similarly a second severance elite seated here, and he was more than enough to suppress first severances like themselves. Brat! A furious shout rang out, and an elder leaped over, the glare he directed at Ling Han filled with killing intent. This was that first severance grand elder of the Qi clan now, he had naturally advanced into the second severance. Previously, in the severing mundane pool, they had wanted to forcibly snatch Ling Han's wooden raft, but two of their group had instead been killed by Ling Han's hand. When they severed the mundane, the third junior of the Qi clan had also died because he had failed, and only he managed to deliver the second strike, advancing into the second severance. Originally, this banquet was meant for first severance elites, but it had not been clearly stated previously. Any person who successfully advanced into the Severing Mundane tier in the Severing Mundane pool could come. Thus, the elder of the Qi clan took advantage of this loophole. He was a second severance, and had naturally passed the last two stages easily. However, the third stage was not related to strength, which stumped him. Now that he had spotted Ling Han, his eyes immediately turned bloodshot, his killing intent blazing. Chapter 1747, Not Down to Earth. Ling Han glanced at him, smiled, and asked, "You are?" The Qi clan elite was shaking with fury. "You have already killed 2 of our clansmen, and you actually dare to ask who I am?" He harshly retorted, "Let's see where you can run to this time." He then made a brazen move. There was no rule here that stated fighting was disallowed, and in a battle of a second severance against a first severance, this was absolute domination. The Fu clan elite that was overseer here had initially wanted to interfere, but after some thought, the behind that he had just raised sunk back down. Rules would be rules. Ling Han chuckled, and said, "Old geezer, you wanted to take my wooden raft forcefully just because your cultivation level was higher than mine, and had thus caused the deaths of your own clansmen. Instead of reflecting on your own actions, you push all the blame onto others. Don't you think that is shameful of you? Die." When the Qi clan elite moved, he was slightly careful. He naturally feared angering the Fu clan. That would be a devastating calamity to a mere Qi clan. However, when he saw that the elite who was overseer here had no intention to stop him, his intense hatred suddenly rose. Boom, the speed of his move instantly quickened tenfold, and it descended down on Ling Han. Those standing on the sidelines all jumped aside, fearing that they would be dragged into the matter. This was a second severance elite. Pa! Ling Han raised his hand and lowered it, firmly delivering a slap to that Qi clan elite. He had used so much force that the latter spun a good few times on the spot. When they saw this, everyone was practically gaping with their mouths wide open. Had their sight blurred? It was Ling Han who was the second severance, and the Qi clan elite was only a first severance? Or it was the Qi clan elite that had slapped Ling Han? But they looked closer, and the end result had not changed in the slightest. The Qi clan elite had just barely steadied his footing, his left cheek very swollen, and his eyes filled with little stars of disbelief. He had actually been slapped. By a mere first severance junior. How was this possible? When they were in the Severing Mundane pool, he had absolutely dominated over Ling Han, forcing the latter to have no choice but to flee pathetically, and though the latter had advanced into the Severing Mundane now, he, too, had successfully advanced into the second severance, so he should still be dominating him. He did not dare believe this, he could not. "You're not awake yet?" Pa! Ling Han delivered another slap, which landed on the other cheek of the Qi clan elite, causing him to spin around again. Putting aside the fact that the Qi clan elite had just advanced into the second severance, even if he had reached the peak stage of the second severance, faced with Ling Han, he would still be easily suppressed. Everyone was completely dumbfounded by the scene, thinking that what the elders said about how a second severance would absolutely crush a first severance was all lies. Looking at this scene was a loud slap right into their faces. "I will kill you," the Qi clan elite roared loudly. Boom, he ignited his life force. A boundless golden light surged out from within his body, turning into multiple golden blades. It was as if he had become a porcupine. He pounced at Ling Han. The golden sword shot forwards, the power directly approaching the peak stage of the second severance. Igniting one's life force was an action of putting one's life on the line. If life force was damaged, then not only would one's cultivation level have no hope of advancing further, his battle prowess would also drop drastically. Though Severing Mundane tier Grand Elders would not die because of this, how could they survive the Immortal's tribulation in future? However, life force could still be restored through the use of celestial medicine. The Qi clan elite only had one thought in mind now, and that was to kill Ling Han. Otherwise, how would he be able to face others in future? Ling Han's look became sinister. Previously, the Qi clan had attempted to snatch his wooden raft from him in the Severing Mundane Pool. Though he had killed 2 of them, he had still been forced to flee in the end. He had not sought this old geezer for an accounting yet, and the latter had delivered himself right up to his doorstep. Whom was he going to kill if not him? Ling Han swiped his palm to one side, and slashed out like the blade of a sword. Pooh! The Qi clan elite was immediately sliced in half by a flash of sword qi. Blood sprayed out, and his spirit was not spared, either. It had been forcibly sliced into 2. However, the vitality of a second severance elite was really tenacious. The 2 halves of the miniature human that the spirit had taken form of still wanted to merge back into one. Unfortunately, Ling Han had used the regulations of the 9 heavens flame and the Xianin source water in this strike. A spirit that had been sliced in 2 actually wanted to survive the hit? There was absolutely no way. The 2 halves of the spirit struggled for a while, but could only be destroyed. A vast vitality and life energy returned to the heaven and earth, but because this was an enclosed space, it suddenly caused the surrounding plants to grow like mad. Everyone was looking at Ling Han dumbly as if they were watching a monster. Even that Fu clan elite looked constipated because even in a 3-star force like the Fu clan, severing mundane tier elites would not easily die, either. Celestial level elites were really hard to kill. But right in front of him, a second severance elite had been slaughtered like a pig, causing him to shiver as well. It should be known that he, too, was only a second severance. This young man was clearly only in the first severance. How could he possibly be so strong? His expression filled with respect, he stood up, and said, "Sir, you can pass through." What a joke, how could he not receive such a prodigy with absolute respect? Ling Han proficiently searched out the spatial god tool from the body of the Qi clan elite. Then, he nodded at the Fu clan elite, and left with the Empress. This time, there weren't even any objections. Would they want to die? Song Ji's and Ma Ying's mouth was twitching. They both thought that they were prodigies, but when they saw Ling Han move, they suddenly realized just how far off they were from a real king tier. After this stage, there was no other person blocking the way. Ling Han and the Empress arrived at the summit. There was a person dressed in white here. He was very young, and sat in a cross-legged position on the ground. There was a table in front of him, on which lay a qin. He was presently strumming the strings lightly, producing a divine tinkling sound. "Please listen to a song of dispersing celestial clouds from me," the white-robed person stated with a smile, showing 2 rows of snow-white teeth. His locks were ink-black, each strand shimmering slightly. Before the song ends, you can pick up the stamp on the table and lay down a stamp. Otherwise, please return from whence you came. So there was a 4th test. "Since someone wants to give us a performance, let's listen then," Ling Han said to the Empress. The Empress nodded, and lightly leaned into Ling Han's arms. The white-robed young man gritted his teeth at the scene. To actually act so lovey-dovey in front of him, were they bullying a lonely bachelor like him? He calmed his heart, and his hands suddenly moved. The sound of the qin immediately rang out. It was indescribably melodious, causing one to unconsciously be enraptured by the music. The young man was very proud. Actually, there was no 4th test. He had only come here to sit here on a spontaneous whim. He wanted to see if the so-called king tiers would be able to survive his song of dispersing celestial clouds. So far, only a bare 2 people had just barely passed his test, and it was because he had let them off easily at the last minute. Otherwise, not a single person would have passed. But he had just strummed a few strokes when he immediately looked shocked. That was because Ling Han's and the Empress's eyes were clear. Neither seemed to have been enraptured by the melody of the song. What strong force of will! Ling Han smiled and said, "The song is noble and solitary. You are not being down to earth. Just take a look at me. He drew out a few bowls, and appended them on the ground. Then, with his hands holding a chopstick each, he began to strike them continuously. There was no order to his movements at all, and they were extremely chaotic, yet like a demonic tune penetrated his brain and bones. The white-robed young man was actually affected unconsciously. The sound of his song immediately changed, completely brought out of tune with Ling Han's interference. Fuck, was this descending lotus flowers? Had he become one of the beggar tribe? Chapter 1748, Fu Gaoyun. The white-robed young man hurriedly moved to pull back the tune. Otherwise, if it was known to others that he, Fu Gaoyun, was actually playing the descending lotus flowers, how would he still have the face to see other people in the future? However, though Ling Han's playing was completely out of order, the rhythm was filled with a strong ability to influence others, and Fu Gaoyun could not pull the tune back to its original path no matter how hard he tried. Wang, wang, wang. Dang, dang, dang. At first, the sound of the qin was still struggling, but it yielded very soon, and was led by Ling Han's tune to play a song of descending lotus flowers. Pung! Fu Gaoyun smashed his qin in his fury. He could not control his hands at all. If he continued playing, he would go crazy. Ling Han laughed, and asked, "So what is this considered now?" He did not know music, but his spirit was strong, and a competition of music was actually a match of spirits. The one who was stronger could influence the other, and it was clear that Fu Gaoyun was no match for him. Even if the latter was already a second severance elite. Fu Gaoyun gritted his teeth, and exclaimed, "I don't care anymore, I want to beat you up first." He couldn't bear it any longer. He, the most outstanding prodigy of the Fu clan, had actually played half a song of descending lotus flowers. In the future, he really did not have any face to see others. He proudly declared, "If you can block 3 moves from me, I'll consider you awesome." Hong, he only pointed a finger, but this small movement caused the weather to change suddenly. That was clearly just a single finger, yet it was wrapped with multiple bands of golden light, as if it had become the highest grade of celestial tool in this world, and moved to suppress Ling Han. Ling Han similarly pointed a finger, and smilingly asked, "What is so difficult about that?" Wang, an indescribably coldness diffused out. So what if he was a second severance? He would still be frozen to death. Ka, ka, ka. The golden finger that Fu Gaoyun had shot out was immediately frozen in ice, and shattered with the violent impact caused by Ling Han's power crashing into it. Yet this finger of Ling Han did not seem to have weakened in the slightest, and was still continuing onwards to strike at Fu Gaoyun. Fu Gaoyun looked astonished. He was a second severance. This brat was too extraordinary. Fu Gaoyun issued a battle cry, and released his full power. With a shake of his hands, 2 long swords appeared in his grasp, and he slashed out towards Ling Han. Ling Han was unarmed. The strength of his present physique was comparable to 2-star pseudo-divine metal. Even a third severance would find it difficult to wound him, and he was strong enough to stand against a second severance who wielded a pseudo-celestial tool. The swords in Fu Gaoyun's hands were indeed pseudo-celestial tools, and they were of 2-star level. Their sharpness, sturdiness, and power were tremendous. Even an ordinary second severance elite would find it hard to avoid being sliced in 2 if he was struck by this weapon. But facing Ling Han, this was still not enough to overcome him. The 2 of them battled fiercely, and for the moment, it was actually hard to decide who was stronger between the 2 of them. Fu Gaoyun was stunned. He had formed 10 million stars in the Eternal River tier, and advanced into severing mundane tier on this basis. Furthermore, he had achieved a flawless severance. He should have been invincible in this cultivation level. But a guy that had just advanced into the first severance was actually capable of confronting him head-on? Hiss! Then if this guy had reached the peak stage of the first severance, wouldn't he be able to easily suppress him? Fu Gaoyun was presently in the late stage of the second severance. With another step, he would reach the peak stage of the second severance, so how could it be as wide a gap as for Ling Han, who would need to advance from the early stage of the first severance to the peak stage? Just what kind of freak was this? You are a severing mundane tear that struck the heaven and earth. He immediately realized. Otherwise, there would definitely not be a guy whose battle prowess was so freakish in this world. Ling Han chuckled, and asked, "Are the 3 moves over?" Fu Gaoyun stopped, and said, "Forget it. You are practically a freak, I don't even have the slightest confidence that I can win." Though he spoke of not having the slightest confidence of victory, he was still considerably confident in himself. That was because not being able to win did not mean that he could not kill him. There were some secret techniques that would hurt yourself if used, but you would be able to obliterate your foe with a single strike. This was only a test. He naturally would not need to use such a deadly move. Moreover, there were in fact only 3 stages. He had only come here to show off and strut around because he was bored. Come, let's go and have a drink." Fu Gaoyun walked over and slung an arm around Ling Han's shoulders, appearing to be very affectionate. This displeased the Empress, and she immediately sent out a palm strike. Fu Gaoyun exclaimed in surprise, and exchanged blows with the Empress in close quarters. The 2 of them sent out palm strikes and switched hands while their bodies remained still. They had already exchanged a few thousand moves in that short time of a few breaths. The Empress was at a slight disadvantage, but it was not like she was completely outmatched. Fuck. Fu Gaoyun's eyes bulged. The Empress was definitely also a severing mundane tear that had struck the heaven and earth. Otherwise, how was a first severance any match for a second severance? Furthermore, if it was not for the fact that she was only in the early stage of the first severance, her battle prowess would definitely not be inferior to his if she had reached the late stage of the first severance, which meant that she was only a minor level inferior to him. He was about to cry. Just think, he, Fu Gaoyun, was an outstanding prodigy of the Fu clan. Though he was not very famous, that was because the Fu clan was protecting him. Fu Gaoyun was considerably proud of himself. Aside from not being able to advance into the severing mundane tier by striking the heaven and earth, his path of cultivation could be considered perfect. But now? He had received a heavy blow to his pride. 2 freaks that had struck the heaven and earth had appeared in close succession. In front of these 2 people, how could he have the face to call himself a prodigy? "My name is Fu Gaoyun. Brother, how should I address you?" Fu Gaoyun appeared to be very carefree, and did not have the airs that a young master of a noble clan should have at all. "Ling Han. This is my wife, Wan Xing," Ling Han introduced. Fu Gaoyun nodded, but did not venture to hook an arm around Ling Han's shoulders again. He said, "Brother Ling, come. I am impressed by your battle prowess. However, I must correct your horrible taste in music." He was still brooding very much on the matter. How could this guy abuse music like this? Every single person had their hobby, and Fu Gaoyun's hobby was playing the qin and shao. What he could not bear to see the most was an idiot in the aspect of music. Thus, when he decided to befriend Ling Han, he was also resolute to improve Ling Han's standards of playing music. Ling Han chuckled. Aside from cultivation and martial arts, his only other interest was alchemy. He did not have the slightest interest in music. So let's see who would be leading who astray. As long as Fu Gaoyun did not go and fool around with Ling Han, the Empress would not move either. The 3 of them descended the mountain, and Ling Han drew the heavenly phoenix divine maiden out of the Black Tower. It was inevitable that he had to introduce her to Fu Gaoyun. Fu Gaoyun called Ling Han brother on the surface, yet addressed the heavenly phoenix divine maiden as younger sister-in-law. His intention to consider himself as the big brother was absolutely clear. Brother, why did you come down with them? Fu Xiaoyun had already arrived at the other side of the foot of the mountain to receive those people that had successfully passed the test, and when she saw Fu Gaoyun walking alongside Ling Han and his group, she couldn't help but look surprised. In her impression, this brother of hers was very proud, and no one was worth his attention. Yet now, he was actually chatting amiably with Ling Han. This was too exaggerated. Fu Gaoyun smiled, and said, "This is my close brother, I naturally have to accompany him." Close brother? Just how long have you known each other? And you are already close brothers? Bei Xuanming was watching from the sidelines, and he involuntarily showed a hint of jealousy. That was because he had once deliberately fawned on this future brother-in-law of his to win his favor, but the latter did not even spare him a look. It's fine if he was just proud, but he actually deigned to be on such good terms with this kind of lowly commoner? Isn't this a deliberate slap right into my face? Ling Han, I wish to battle you once more. Just at this moment, Xiaofan called out loudly. Chapter 1749, Bei Xuanming issues a challenge. In this place, only two people had passed for now, Xiaofan and Changsun Liang. Changsun Liang only nodded at Ling Han, and did not approach to greet him. There was no need to rush things. Xiaofan's eyes were spitting fire. Previously, he had been beaten like a punching bag and kicked around like a ball by Ling Han and the Empress. This was the greatest humiliation he had ever experienced in this lifetime. Before breaking through, he was sure that there was no way that he could match Ling Han and the Empress, but it was a different story now that he had advanced into the severing mundane tier. This was a reshuffling of cards in terms of strength. He had attained a flawless severance. Thus, even if Ling Han had similarly achieved a flawless severance, his battle prowess could not possibly be all that much higher than his. Then, his bountiful battle experience and various secret techniques would be extraordinarily effective. He was going to get his vengeance. Who do you think you are? Fu Gaoyun suddenly spoke up. Without any prior sign, he made his move, and threw out a punch at Xiaofan. Though Xiaofan was caught off guard, as a first severance elite, as well as a king tier of the present generation, his reaction speed naturally would not be slow. He immediately shot out, and rapidly leaped backwards. However, a second severance would completely dominate a first severance, and this was a fact that had never been wrong throughout the ages except when one encountered the level of freaks the likes of Ling Han and the Empress. How could Xiaofan possibly manage to escape completely? The power that Fu Gaoyun shot out formed a fist that landed on Xiaofan, and this was still because the latter had managed to dodge in the nick of time, and had thus escaped being hit by the fist head-on. Instead, it only scraped against him. Even so, Xiaofan was still sent flying by the force. He had already begun throwing up blood like mad even while he was still in midair. Fu Xiaoyun and the others were confused. Why had Fu Gaoyun moved so suddenly? Xiaofan landed, and only regained his footing after stumbling a few steps. Gritting his teeth, he asked, "May I know why young Master Fu attacked me? Didn't you want to spar with Brother Ling?" Fu Gaoyun asked disdainfully. "Then, sparring with me is the same." Xiaofan's eyes were spitting fire from his utter fury, and an incomparable jealousy filled his heart. So Ling Han had become good friends with the young master of the Fu clan? Just look, he had clearly issued his challenge towards Ling Han, yet it was Fu Gaoyun who had immediately cut in. Just how good were their relations? Fu Xiaoyun and the others also thought the same, and similarly felt incredibly curious, especially in Fu Xiaoyun's case. She knew very well how proud this elder brother of hers was, and it was really difficult for anyone to become his good friend. Ho ho. Fu Gaoyun shook his head. Do you all think that I have only moved just because I call him Brother Ling? That's right, if anyone wants to challenge my brother, I naturally will accept it on his behalf. However, even if I did not, this kind of trash would not be any match for my brother Ling either. He paused, and scanned every person's expression before finally saying, just now, Brother Ling has managed to fight me on equal terms. What? Fu Xiaoyun, Bei Xuanming, Xiao Sheng, and even Changsan Liang showed an expression of disbelief. You're really exaggerating too much here. It should be known that you are a second severance here. King tiers like them were already awesome enough, but they could only be invincible among their peers. Even if they had cultivated to the peak stage of the first severance, they could only barely manage a tie against an opponent in the early stage of the second severance. There was nothing else that could be done. Having an additional severance meant a world of difference in terms of battle prowess. And Fu Gaoyun was not only a second severance, but also one that was in the late stage of the second severance, and was also a king tier in the second severance. In theory, even a king tier at the peak stage of the second severance could only just barely suppress him. But now, a guy that had just advanced into the first severance actually managed to fight Fu Gaoyun to a tie? Wasn't that a major joke? I don't believe it. Xiao Sheng immediately shouted, slightly despondent. If these words were true, this meant that it was impossible for him to get his vengeance, at least in the level of the severing mundane tier. He could only anticipate another reshuffling of cards in terms of strength after breaking through to the dividing soul tier. But putting aside the fact whether they would be able to reach this kind of height or not, even if they could, just how many years later would that be? Even if he had the talent of a king tier, that would at least need 10 billion years. Fu Gaoyun merely scoffed, not even bothering to refute him. Did he need the agreement of this kind of trash? I don't believe it either. Bei Xuanming declared darkly. If Ling Han had managed to fight Fu Gaoyun to a tie, then wouldn't that mean that the former's strength was superior to his? He could not accept that. If he agreed to these words, he would never be able to hold his head up in front of Ling Han again. So what if you don't believe it? Fu Gaoyun asked disdainfully. Though the strength of the Fu clan was indeed inferior to the lunar sect, they were both three-star forces, and neither had to be afraid of the other. Moreover, who knew how far the two forces were from each other? There were at least 10 three-star forces between them. Even if the lunar sect wanted to start a war, how were they supposed to pass over so many different forces? They could only battle their whole way through, but if they did that, then when their troops had finally arrived, the lunar sect would not be left with many elites either. Bei Xuanming naturally knew this fact as well. Thus, he did not become angry, and merely smiled faintly, and asked, Ling Han, do you dare battle me? Ling Han laughed, and said, I have been waiting for these words from you. You know, I have very much wanted to thrash that damn face of yours since long ago. Yeah, Brother Ling, you have that kind of feeling as well. Fu Gaoyun immediately clapped his hands and laughed loudly. I, too, very much want to thrash his face, but it would not be appropriate for me to do so given my identity. I will just have to delegate this mission to you. It's no big deal. Ling Han nodded. The two of you. Bei Xuanming gritted his teeth, his killing intent blazing. They actually dared to look down on him so much. He was the holy son of the lunar sect, an undisputed king tier. How could the might of a king tier allow disdain to be cast upon him? If you're not convinced, I'll beat you into submission. Ling Han took a step forward, and flicked his robes, looking very relaxed. Just because of your words, Bei Xuanming said sinisterly. He had not finished speaking, but the killing intent in his eyes was already blazing like fire. Ling Han turned and asked Fu Gaoyun, Brother Fu, it would be all right for me to kill him, right? Fu Gaoyun immediately shuddered, and even his expression had turned a little gray. He hurriedly exclaimed, definitely not. You see, even he was not in the right position to thrash Bei Xuanming. That was because he would be bullying him with his superior strength, and the lunar sect would definitely fly into a thunderous rage. And if their holy son died here, the matter would become a huge issue. The lunar sect would have a just reason to dispatch their troops, and it was not very likely that the other forces along the way would stand in their way. Facing the lunar sect that ranked in the top 3 amongst 3-star forces in terms of strength without these shields, the Fu clan would really be in great trouble. Why not? Ling Han asked with a smile. With your courage, Brother Fu, are you afraid of the mere lunar sect? Fuck, you can't screw me over like this. Fu Gaoyun's expression was filled with resentment. He had discovered that Ling Han was not only an idiot in terms of music, but also possessed the ability to make anyone go crazy. I'll call you boss, all right? Have the two of you said enough? Bei Xuanming was practically spitting out word after word, flames spurting from his gaze. Were they treating him like air? You didn't make a move all this while, so we chatted a while to pass the time. Ling Han broke into a grin. Come on then, what are you standing around for? Make your move so we can quickly finish the fight and go home. What mad arrogance! Bei Xuanming moved. Boom, he was filled with fury, so his first move was a powerful one. Cold light shot from his eyes, forming 2 swords of ice that ruthlessly stabbed out at Ling Han. Chapter 1750, Give my brother Ling some consideration. Ling Han breathed in a mouthful of air, and blew forwards. A ball of fiery flame danced. The regulations of the Great Tao actually took the form of chains that rattled loudly. Ling Han couldn't help but smile in satisfaction. The might of the 9 heavens flame had become stronger and stronger. As one of the source flames of the heaven and earth, the strength of its life force, it was naturally powerful. Under the burning of the fierce flames, the 2 ice swords immediately melted, and became steam. The regulations embedded in them were also completely disintegrated, and not the slightest bit remained. Bei Xuanming's expression became grim in an instant. At the beginning, he was only filled with a boundless fury, and thought that Ling Han and Fu Gaoyun were deliberately making fun of him, but he could tell if his opponent was an elite as long as he made his move. Ling Han was very strong. Not just he, Fu Xiaoyun, Xiao Sheng, and Changsun Liang were similarly incomparably stunned. Only the Empress, the heavenly phoenix divine maiden, and Fu Gaoyun looked like this was completely as they had expected. Severing mundane through the alternative method. Bei Xuanming guessed immediately. Otherwise, how could he have possibly surpassed the gap of a minor level and battle? This guy actually reached the height that only holy sons and holy daughters of the true major sects could attain. Striking the heaven and earth. Bei Xuanming's eyes were red with envy. He had also attempted advancing to the severing mundane tier through striking the heaven and earth, but he had only struck once, and he did not dare continue further. Otherwise, it would definitely be his life that would be severed. At first, he had thought this was something that only existed in legends. Among 3-star forces, or even 4-star forces, this could not possibly be seen. But the reality was a harsh slap in his face. A guy that was just a piece of trash in his eyes had actually reached the height that he had dreamt of. He did not dare believe this, and was not willing to, either. Meanwhile, Fu Xiaoyun's beautiful eyes lit up. Severing mundane with the alternate method. So someone could actually manage it? Severing mundane through the alternative method. Xiao Sheng and Changsun Liang mumbled softly. Limited by their level, they were still unaware that one could advance into the severing mundane tier through striking the heaven and earth. Sister, why don't you just marry Brother Ling? Fu Gaoyun played the role of matchmaker. You see, my brother Ling's natural talent is who knows how many times better than that despicable guy's, and in future, he would definitely be able to beat up various prodigies. If you miss out on such a good man, you will definitely be crying in future. He did not lower his voice when he said these words, so Bei Xuanming could hear each word very clearly. Bei Xuanming's expression was so dark that it was practically dripping. How could you undermine him right in front of his face like this? He was truly angered by now. He drew a hand over the middle of his forehead, and actually drew out a silver short sword that was only 3 inches long from it. This sword seemed to have been formed from ice. The moment it was drawn, the temperature in their surroundings dropped drastically. Fu Gaoyun and the Empress looked undisturbed, but the others were all shuddering heavily. Fu Gaoyun and the Empress released their auras, defending Fu Xiaoyun and the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden, respectively, but Xiao Sheng and Chang Sunliang had no one to take care of them, so they could only retreat far away. However, they immediately looked shocked because they saw that the Empress was actually capable of resisting the might of that pseudo-celestial tool. She, too, has advanced into the severing mundane tier by striking the heaven and earth, Fu Gaoyun explained to his sister. Fu Xiaoyun's small mouth immediately turned into an O, and Bei Xuanming almost stumbled. There were actually as many as 2 such prodigies. Chang Sunliang and Xiao Sheng were rendered speechless. They did not know the exact significance of advancing into the severing mundane tier through striking the heaven and earth, but there was one fact that could be confirmed: if one advanced to the severing mundane tier in this manner, the strength of his battle prowess would be astonishing. For example, Ling Han was presently able to fight on even terms with Bei Xuanming because he had successfully struck the heaven and earth. Bei Xuanming dismissed all his other thoughts, and focused on the small sword in his hand. This was Icy Cloud Sword, a 2-star pseudo-celestial tool. If he could completely activate its full might, it could reach the extent of the 3rd severance or even the 4th severance. Because he was the holy son of the lunar sect, he was worthy of this kind of pseudo-celestial tool. With Bei Xuanming's present cultivation level, he definitely would not be able to completely force out the might of this Icy Cloud Sword, but it would not be difficult for him to attain the peak stage of the 2nd severance. Ling Han is indeed very strong. You are able to match me, someone in the early stage of the 2nd severance, but how could it be that you would be able to oppose even the peak stage of the 2nd severance? He was not going to believe that. When the Icy Cloud Sword emerges, all the heaven and earth will be sealed in ice. Bei Xuanming exclaimed. The short sword rose up into the air, but was quickly becoming larger in size, and turned into a massive sword that was 300 meters long. The power of ice was strong, and various patterns appeared, their strokes glowing. Ling Han sighed. He had not managed to improve the divine demon sword to the level of a pseudo-celestial tool, and the broken wooden sword was eternally frozen at the level of level 20 god tool, so there was no weapon that he could actually use now. It could not be helped. Who asked him to have such a strong physique? His actual need of a weapon was not very strong. He greeted the incoming attack with a punch of his own. The power of regulation of the Xianin source water channeled through, fighting ice with ice. Pung! The sword and fist clashed, and a layer of ice formed on both sword and fist at the same time, and spread out towards both their arms. Ling Han was unafraid, and allowed the ice to form as it willed, but Bei Xuanming paled in shock. With a strong shake, he hurriedly withdrew his sword and retreated. He repeatedly spurred on the might of the sword. Pa, pa, pa. The ice on the sword's blade shattered and fell onto the ground. Only then did he sigh in relief. But when he raised his head, he turned pale in shock. That was because Ling Han had also easily shook his arm, and then was completely fine thereafter. This was a pseudo-celestial tool he was holding, and that was why he could be strong. You are only a body of blood and flesh, so how can you possibly be so freakish? I am going to beat you up now. Ling Han rushed forwards, launching a powerful offensive. Bei Xuanming controlled the massive sword to greet his offensive mentally, while both his hands balled into fists, and began to use one celestial technique after another. The holy son of the lunar sect had naturally grasped a considerable number of secret techniques, but no matter how hard he tried, they were all ineffective against Ling Han. If he wanted to stand against Ling Han, he would at least have to reach the height of Fu Gaoyun. At present, Bei Xuanming's cultivation level was considerably weaker, so naturally he could only stay on the defensive. Ling Han aggressively suppressed him, and Bei Xuanming did not even have the ability to fight back anymore. He could only stay on the defensive in a completely passive position, and cut a sorry figure. Xiao Sheng, Changsun Liang, and Fu Xiaoyun were all dumbfounded with shock. This scene was something that they had completely been unable to imagine. Severing mundane with the alternate method could actually raise strength to this level? Pang! Ling Han tore through Bei Xuanming's defenses with a single punch, and began to beat this guy up. This guy had repeatedly wanted to kill him. Did he think that he was unaware of it? If the two of them had been fighting alone, Ling Han definitely would not have held back, but if he killed Bei Xuanming here, it would cause the Fu clan to bear responsibility as well. Ling Han thought Fu Gaoyun was quite likable, so he decided to give him some face. But even so, Bei Xuanming was still very quickly pummeled into a pig's head. "Sister, are you sure you won't reconsider?" Fu Gaoyun elbowed his sister. Fu Xiaoyun's cheek twitched. Bei Xuanming was a king tier, but in front of Ling Han, he was practically rendered incapable of fighting back. This really caused her jaw to drop. Though she knew that this was not because Bei Xuanming was weak, but rather due to the fact that Ling Han was too strong, it had still become a thorn in her heart, leaving behind this scene of Bei Xuanming being in such a sorry state. When Ling Han had thrashed him to his heart's content, he finally withdrew his fists. Bei Xuanming actually had not sustained any heavy injuries. He got back to his feet, his expression livid. He really no longer had any face to show himself. "Xiao," it was at this moment that a figure shot forwards and arrived. It was a white-haired elder. You're here, brat." It was none other than Xiang Yan, and as he looked at Ling Han, his expression was filled with excitement. Chapter 1751, Come Learn Alchemy with Me. Huh? The Fu siblings were looking at Ling Han with surprise. No way, this brat actually made a connection with Elder Yan? It should be known that Xiang Yan was one of the very most important resources of the Fu clan. In the celestial realm, alchemists were still a class that surpassed the rest. There was a pitifully small number of celestial-level alchemists, and every single one would be recruited by the various powerful forces, which would be willing to spare no expense in recruiting them. There was no helping it. There were always conflicts and battles among the powerful forces and minor forces, and there occasionally would be casualties and deaths. With a high-grade alchemist, one could greatly increase the survival chances of the elites among their ranks. Xiang Yan was a 3-star alchemist. In the celestial realm, there were a total of 5 levels for alchemists. 1 star corresponded to the severing mundane tier, 2 stars corresponded to dividing soul tier, and a 3-star alchemist naturally corresponded to immortal palace tier. The Fu clan had been able to recruit Xiang Yan because the Grand Elder of the Fu clan had once saved Situ Tang's life. Later on, Situ Tang chose to join the Fu clan and become their personal alchemist, and at that time, Xiang Yan was still Situ Tang's good friend, so he came along with him. Though Xiang Yan and Situ Tang had turned hostile now, Xiang Yan still had no plans of leaving. However, the Fu clan was very concerned because the other 3-star forces had always been secretly making contact with Xiang Yan. A high-grade alchemist was comparable to 10 elites of the same level. The Fu clan naturally would not let go of Xiang Yan for any reason, and thus all the members of the entire clan were incredibly respectful towards Xiang Yan. Could it be that Ling Han had offended Xiang Yan? This was very serious. If Xiang Yan was determined to target Ling Han, then even the Grand Elder of the Fu clan could possibly move out personally. A high-grade alchemist was really that awesome. Bei Xuanming showed a cold smirk. So as it turned out, this brat had offended a high-grade alchemist, haha. It should be known that the part of the reason that the lunar sect wanted to form an alliance with the Fu clan through matrimony was because they had designs on those two 3-star alchemists. If Xiang Yan's relations with the Fu clan became hostile due to this, he could take advantage of the opportunity and pull him over to their side to strengthen the power of the lunar sect. Even Fu Gaoyun could not help but cautiously ask, "Elder Yan, it's nothing major, right?" In front of this high-grade alchemist, he really did not dare put on the airs of the heir of the Fu clan. In fact, even if he became the patriarch of the Fu clan, he would still have to be polite to Xiang Yan. Xiang Yan turned around and glared at him harshly, his beard practically rising. He smacked a palm onto Fu Gaoyun's head. "Nothing major? Nothing major? You actually dare to undermine what I have invested my whole life into." This was the winds and fire's 9 clouds pill, and he had invested who knew how much blood, sweat, and tears into it, and what did he actually say? He was really going to die from fury here. Ah, so serious. Fu Gaoyun did not even dare dodge, and allowed Xiang Yan to land a solid hit. However, this slap was naturally not heavy. He looked at Ling Han plaintively. "Just how much of a troublemaker are you? Just how long have you been in here, and you have already offended the person that you cannot afford to offend the most? What should I say about you?" He gritted his teeth, and exclaimed, "Ling Han, quickly, admit your fault." He signaled at Ling Han with his eyes. What he meant was to quickly apologize to this great alchemist, and he would say a few nice words so that this big problem became a small one, and the small problem could be turned into no problem at all. When Bei Xuanming heard this, he immediately leaped out with a cold sneer. What a joke! How could he possibly allow this matter to be easily resolved like this? If he could not deal with Ling Han, then he could make use of the Fu clan to get rid of Ling Han. What you should not have done the most was to offend an alchemist, and one that was a 3-star alchemist at that. It could be said that as long as Xiang Yan was willing to join the lunar sect, the sect master of the lunar sect could even repeal him, the Holy Sun. He was that awesome. Brother Fu, your words are wrong. Alchemists are beings that surpass the rest, and now that this person has offended Elder Yan, how could it be forgiven with a simple apology? He smirked. If this kind of criminal was not heavily punished, wouldn't it be a challenge to the prestige of all alchemists? Fu Gaoyun glared harshly at him, and felt that this guy was really too despicable. He could not match Ling Han in strength, and actually used such a method to get his revenge. He was really undeserving of being a king tier. Fu Xiaoyun also revealed a hint of disdain. She could accept her man having lost a battle, but he definitely could not have the trait of a sore loser. Bei Xuanming gritted his teeth. He could not bother about her now. If he did not get Ling Han killed, what would there be left of his pride? What are you little bastards blabbering about? Xiang Yan demanded impatiently. Couldn't they allow him to finish his words properly? Elder Yan. Both Fu Gaoyun and Bei Xuanming lowered their heads in respect. It could not be helped. An alchemist had spoken, and putting aside juniors like them, even immortal palace tier elites would have to give him some face. However, Fu Gaoyun was grimacing, while Bei Xuanming showed an expression as if his dastardly scheme had succeeded. Brother Ling, are you interested to come learn alchemy with me? Xiang Yan finally opened his mouth to ask a question with a smile when he saw that everyone had become quiet. Damn! Instantly, Fu Gaoyun, Bei Xuanming, Changsun Liang, and the others all felt their minds shake, and they almost collapsed onto the ground. Had they heard wrongly? Xiang Yan was actually asking Ling Han if he had interest in learning alchemy? This meant that he wanted to take Ling Han as his disciple. The class of alchemists was extremely proud and aloof because there would only be others begging them, and it would never happen the other way around. Furthermore, the requirements for becoming an alchemist were extremely harsh. Thus, there was an extremely limited number of them, which further increased the importance of this group. Celestials had an unlimited lifespan, and those like Fu Gaoyun and Bei Xuanming were definitely involved in other fields outside of cultivation, such as music. In truth, what they wanted the most was to gain the status of alchemist as well. That would really be too awesome. But the problem was that it was not something that was possible just because they wanted to. And now this opportunity that others could only dream about was laid in front of Ling Han. Even Fu Gaoyun was beginning to envy Ling Han. He had begged Xiang Yan who knew how many times, but the latter would always have an expression of dislike on his face, and tell him to get lost with a dismissive wave. Bei Xuanming's face had turned green. As it turned out, he had been playing the role of a joker for all this while. He wasn't here to punish Ling Han harshly, but rather wanted to take the latter as his disciple. Fuck. Ling Han thought for a moment, and then said, "No, thanks. My ambition lies in martial arts and cultivation." Hearing Ling Han's words of rejection, everyone collectively turned into stone. Such a great opportunity, and you actually refused so decisively and resolutely. To compare themselves against him would surely drive them crazy. Xiang Yan also felt slightly like going crazy, and exclaimed, "What is so good about cultivation? As long as you have advanced into the severing mundane tier, your lifespan would be unlimited. Moreover, as long as your achievement in alchemy is outstanding, you could also advance through the cultivation levels through alchemy, and attain the supreme tier of celestial king tier." He was a little proud. For example, me. After advancing into the severing mundane, I have not cultivated a single day. Every day, I would only be concocting alchemical pills, and you see, in just over 20 billion years, I am already at the level of Heaven Soul. He had only reached Heaven Soul in over 20 billion years? Ling Han shook his head. He possessed the Black Tower, and it was highly possible that he would be targeted by supreme elites. How did he have so much time that he could calmly cultivate at his leisure? Furthermore, he still had to find his wife and son, so how could he possibly stay here? "No," he replied. Xiang Yan really wanted to strangle Ling Han's neck, and force him to nod and agree. This was giving him an opportunity to become an alchemist, but why was his expression full of dislike? It should be known that he only had to announce that he wanted to take a disciple, and it was guaranteed that the holy sons and holy daughters of the major sects and the heirs of the top-tier noble clans would all line up in front of him to freely choose from. And now he had taken the initiative to speak up, yet Ling Han actually refused once, and then refused a second time. What exactly is wrong with your head, brat? Chapter 1752, Learning How to Refine a Celestial Pill. Xiang Yan was about to go crazy, while Fu Gaoyun felt gloomy. He recalled how he had repeatedly begged Xiang Yan to take him as a disciple before, and the latter completely ignored him. Yet now, it was Ling Han who was doing the ignoring, and Xiang Yan was still unwilling to give up. This comparison really made him almost want to cry. "I don't care. With how proficiently you have grasped the regulations of fire, it would be too much of a waste for you not to be an alchemist." Xiang Yan shook his head. No matter what, he could not let go of such a prodigious alchemy genius. Ling Han smiled, and said, "How about this? In any case, I will go to the Fu clan. In the future, outside of cultivation, I will ask Senior for guidance as well." This, he had gained the favor of an alchemist, and he was actually bargaining like this as if he was very reluctant. If one posed too much, he would definitely be struck by lightning. However, Fu Gaoyun and Fu Xiaoyun were very pleased because it was clear that Xiang Yan had a very high opinion of Ling Han. In that case, as long as Ling Han could stay in the Fu clan, the possibility of Xiang Yan leaving would be extremely low. Xiang Yan said a few more words of persuasion, but could only agree reluctantly. He looked at Bei Xuanming, and the fury in his heart instantly had a target for venting. He grabbed Bei Xuanming with a single move, and threw a series of punches at him. Who asked this brat's words to be so unpleasant? Bei Xuanming was incredibly depressed, yet could only endure the beating. Putting aside the fact that his strength was far inferior to Xiang Yan's, even if his strength matched the latter's, or even surpassed it, he would not dare resist either. This was a 3-star alchemist. He was almost throwing up blood in his fury. He had really hit rock bottom in his luck today. First, he had sustained a beating at Ling Han's hands, which was then followed by a 3-star alchemist. Furthermore, if this matter was made known to the sect master of the lunar sect, he would probably give him another thrashing. You actually dared to offend a 3-star alchemist? Just how much trouble were you trying to draw to our lunar sect? After Xiang Yan had vented his anger, he strode off. Then, he reminded Ling Han repeatedly that he was to visit him once he had the time. Brother Ling, I'm convinced. Fu Gaoyun gave Ling Han a thumbs up. Ling Han was probably the only severing mundane tier that dared to put on airs in front of a 3-star alchemist. Meanwhile, Bei Xuanming humphed. Then, he turned around and left. He really had no face to show himself. Great! Fu Gaoyun couldn't help but clap as he looked at Bei Xuanming's receding back. I disliked this guy from the first moment I saw him. Brother Ling, it would be better for you to become my brother-in-law instead. Ahead of them, Bei Xuanming suddenly stumbled. Then, he shot forwards quickly, and disappeared in an instant. Brother! Fu Xiaoyun blushed slightly. Yet Fu Gaoyun was uncaring, and continued, just look at my brother. Not only is he an outstanding talent, his natural talent in cultivation is astonishing, and he has further gained the favor of Elder Xiang. Where are you going to find such an outstanding man? Ling Han laughed, and said, too bad, too bad. Such an outstanding man is already taken. He wrapped his arms around the Empress and the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden, showing that he was already satisfied with what he had. Che, isn't it very normal for men to have many wives? Fu Gaoyun was still unwilling to give up. Ling Han's expression became a little strange. If he counted Hun Yo and the others, he seemed to have 8 lovers already. The positions of 3 wives and 4 concubines was not even enough. Come, let's go and have a drink. He changed the topic. Let's drink, let's drink. True enough, Fu Gaoyun forgot about this matter once he spoke of drinking. He still had an arduous task ahead of him, and that was to improve Ling Han's taste in music, or his music sense. In short, at present, there was nothing that he could pick about in Ling Han's personality, but his music sense was really too horrible. With the 2 men heading off to drink, Fu Xiaoyun accompanied the Empress and the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden. Women naturally would be chatting about topics that interested women. Ling Han and Fu Gaoyun only ended their drinking spree by the next day's morning. Then, Fu Gaoyun discovered to his grief that song of descending lotus flower was deeply implanted in his head. The moment he touched the strings of the qin, he would automatically play it. Oh no! Ling Han's music sense had not been improved, and it was his music sense that had deteriorated instead. This time, the Fu clan had still recruited a considerable number of prodigies, and they were all young king tiers that had attained a flawless severance previously. The so-called small test did not actually have any decisive significance. It was only set up so that these king tiers would not become too arrogant, and to take them a notch down. This indeed was very effective. These king tiers had all curbed some of their pride, and knew that prodigies like them were still not qualified to put on airs in front of the Fu clan yet. Ling Han asked Fu Gaoyun for help in buying a great volume of level 20 godly metal. He wanted to send the divine demon sword up to the level of divine metal. Even if it did not manage to reach the level of divine metal, it could still probably attain the level of 1-star or 2-star divine metal. There was definitely no lack of level 20 godly metal in the celestial realm. However, this required a great amount of star stones. Though Ling Han had earned much, and also robbed a considerable amount, this number was still a drop in the ocean compared to what was needed to advance the divine demon sword to become a celestial tool. Thus, he soon went off to find Xiang Yan, and asked him for some guidance on how to refine a celestial pill. In future, he would be able to earn money on his own. Xiang Yan had high hopes of him, and only feared that he would not come. As long as Ling Han asked a question, he would reply without holding anything back. Once Ling Han returned, he comprehended Tao beneath the reincarnation tree. However, even so, he had only begun to refine the most basic celestial pill a month later, and the result was that the cauldron exploded as expected. But Xiang Yan got a great shock. "You are practically inhuman, brat," the old geezer exclaimed in shock. "Though I have already had a high estimation of you, I previously thought that it would already be very impressive if you could begin refining pills 10,000 years later, yet you actually only used a month's time." One had to interweave the regulations of the great Tao to fully understand the pharmacology of celestial pills, and this was an incredibly complicated matter. Even 10,000 years could not be considered a long time. But Ling Han had the reincarnation tree. One day was equivalent to 100 years, and a month would mean 3,000 years. In truth, he had also spent a very long time. It was only that Xiang Yan had completely no idea. Looking at your rate of advancement, you would be able to refine the first cauldron of celestial pills in 10 years' time at most. Xiang Yan was very envious of Ling Han. Even he could only admit his defeat in front of such a prodigious alchemy genius like Ling Han. He would only be able to refine the first cauldron of celestial pills after 10 years? Ling Han shook his head with a sigh. It was really difficult. But such a speed was already overwhelmingly fast. Most alchemists that could successfully refine a celestial-level pill in 1,000,000 years' time counting from the time they first got in contact with it to successful refinement would belong to the category of genius, and even if it took 100 million years, don't think it was too long either. Who asked for lifespan to be unlimited after the severing mundane tier? They had more than enough time to expend, but what was crucial was if there would be so much celestial medicine to allow your squandering. There was no helping it, they could only progress slowly. Ling Han even asked Fu Gaoyun to investigate the matter of the rock palace, while he, the Empress, and the heavenly phoenix divine maiden left. Since they had already advanced into the severing mundane tier, he was going to return to Dark Moon City, and call the Ding clan in for a good accounting of old debts. At present, there were only 3 people that he was no match for, and they were Ding Yaolong, Ding Shan, and Ding Song, but what other member of the Ding clan was capable of standing against him? Though Zhang Chong had advanced into the severing mundane tier, he had not gained the favor of the Fu clan. Thus, he was going to return to Dark Moon City with Mao Dai and his daughter. Hence, Ling Han went along with them. They used a massive ship, and after a good few months of traveling, they returned to Dark Moon City. In these few months, Ling Han had spent every single day comprehending Tao underneath the reincarnation tree. Not only had he completely stabilized his cultivation level, he had even forged forwards into the middle stage of the first severant celestial level meant cultivation of regulations, and power was only secondary. Of course, if the level of regulations was too high, and power was too weak, the balance would be lost. But the standards of measuring cultivation level would no longer take power into consideration, only regulations. The Empress had also refined a considerable number of portions of heavenly tribulation fluid, and had grasped 2 kinds of lightning element secret techniques. Now, she was going to improve this kind of secret technique up to celestial level, and further increase her own battle prowess. Ling Han leaped down from the ship. On this return to Dark Moon City, he was filled with confidence because he was already a severing mundane tier Grand Elder. Ding clan, it's time for you to pay a little interest. Chapter 1753, A Great Massacre. This was already not Ling Han's first time coming to Dark Moon City, but Ling Han had never been as confident as he was today. In the past, the origin of his confidence in opposing the Ding clan was the Black Tower. Even if I was no match for you, I could still hide. However, this actually was extremely inconsistent with Ling Han's personality. What he wanted was to settle debts of gratitude and revenge quickly. And this time, he truly possessed this ability. Come on, Ding clan. It is time to give you a surprise. The heavenly phoenix divine maiden entered into the Black Tower for now. Ling Han and the Empress walked hand in hand. In fact, the Empress showed her true face this time. In this one-star city, there was no longer anything that they had to fear. When they arrived at the city gates, they did not even need to release their auras as severing mundane tears. The Empress's exquisite beauty and noble demeanor immediately caused those guards to watch in a daze. They involuntarily crouched down automatically, giving the Empress their utmost humble respect. At first, Mao Dai had wanted to guard Ling Han and the Empress from the dark, but Ling Han refused, so he did not speak further. Previously, Ling Han had also successfully escaped from the Ding clan manor completely unscathed. This time, with his strength having soared suddenly, there was even less need to worry about him. Ling Han and the Empress walked towards the Ding clan manor. However, though Dark Moon City was only a one-star city, its territory was really too massive, and added with the restrictions that the regulations of the celestial realm imposed on them, the two of them walked for a whole 3 days, and only then did they finally arrive at the Ding clan manor. Ling Han headed directly for the main doors while appearing to be extremely relaxed, his arm around the Empress's waist. Stop! At first, the guards at the doors planned to call Ling Han and the Empress to a halt, but when they suddenly set eyes on the Empress's incomparably exquisite beauty, the 6 of them gaped widely at the same time, their eyes staring fixedly at her, no longer able to utter another word. Wife, you can oppose millions and millions of elites on your own. Ling Han praised. The Empress's beauty and demeanor were both top grade. That kind of born air of nobility was capable of making innumerable people bow to her, and it was no wonder that the Empress was so proud. The Empress broke into a smile, her expression of pride turning into an expression as soft and gentle as water in front of Ling Han. Peng, 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 peng. Ling Han moved, and sent all 6 of the people at the main doors flying. Their figures flew and danced like they were straws being blown around in the wind. Some crashed into the main doors, creating a hole in the main doors with the force behind them, and some crashed into the walls. The walls did not break, but their bones were broken, and they were dead. Ling Han did not give them any mercy. He really did not have the slightest bit of positive feeling for the Ding clan. This was a clan that was emanating a rotten smell of evil and venom right from its very roots. Perhaps even the lairs of mountain bandits would be cleaner than this place. He could launch a massacre against the mountain bandits, so why couldn't he do the same here? 4 of the group of 6 died on the spot, and there were another 2 that were not too far from death. They were moaning there, just barely breathing. Ling Han extracted their 2 spirits for a search, and his expression involuntarily became even more menacing. As expected, there was not a single good person in the Ding clan. Even these guards had done many evil deeds, committing acts of tyranny because they had the Ding clan backing them up, and who knew how many people they had brought to ruin. Those who commit great evils should be eliminated, those who commit small sins should also be killed. Ling Han pointed out a finger. A bolt of lightning shot out, turning into a battle spear, and killing the 2 guards that had not died. Since the heavens were cruel, he would carry out punishment on their behalf. Who goes there? To actually there create a disturbance in our Ding clan. A few harsh shouts rang out, and 7 people shot out from the inside of the Ding clan manor. Each of them had expressions of thunderous rage. The Ding clan was one of the 3 great overlords of Dark Moon City, who would dare barge in and cause destruction. Oh, no! It's that despicable brat. Ling Han has charged here. Quick, go and get Grand Elder. When these 7 people saw Ling Han clearly, their faces involuntarily turned green from fear. In the Ding clan, Ling Han was definitely the person that they loathed the most, but he was also an existence that had been tagged as incredibly dangerous. Grand Elder Ding, who had been killed by this despicable brat. The 7 people hurriedly braked, then turned around, and fled. The highest in cultivation level among them was only just a Genesis tier, so how could they possibly be any match for Ling Han, who was invincible in Genesis tier? They still did not know that Ling Han had advanced into the Severing Mundane tier, and become a celestial being. The Empress moved. Shua, 7 flashes of sword chi that had taken the form of lightning bolts shot out. Pa, 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 pa. The 7 people exploded and turned into nothing the moment they were struck. The destructive power of lightning was really too terrifying. Ling Han smiled slightly. After the Empress had drunk the Heaven's Tribulation fluid, she had grasped 2 secret techniques of lightning. One of them was this thunderbolt, and the other was similarly lightning flash. Both secret techniques were very practical for use. The 2 of them had calm expressions, and they entered into the Ding clan manor after exchanging a look. For this place that is hiding so much filth, it is best to raze it to the ground. Ling Han waved his fists and shot out a series of punches. Pang, pang, pang. As the violent power washed out madly, the structures all around instantly collapsed area by area, and the whole Ding clan was shivering greatly. Just what level of power was he at by now? The display of power from a first Severance Grand Elder would be destroying what was old and rotten. How dare you? A powerful figure appeared, and even more members of the Ding clan surged out from all around. All of them were glaring at Ling Han furiously, but when they saw the Empress, this kind of raging expression immediately disappeared without a trace. Ling Han. That powerful figure was a first Severance Grand Elder, and his name was Ding Jun. His expression was a little strange because Ding Hu had died in Ling Han's hands, but according to reason, a Severing Mundane tier would dominate absolutely over a Genesis tier. At the moment, he did not know what kind of reaction he should make. Should he move directly, or should he ask for the mobilization of stronger elites? However, more than half of the Severing Mundane tiers of the clan had been sent out to search for Ling Han. Aside from him, there was only one other first Severance left behind, and besides them, the only one left was Ding Yaolong. Evil brat, you've come to receive your death, a white-haired elder called out. That was a Genesis tier of the Ding clan. Even in the celestial realm, it was not everyone that could easily cultivate the Genesis tier. Ling Han cast a look at that elder. Pa! The elder exploded and turned into a shower of blood under the terrifying pressure. How dare you! Ding Jun roared in fury. He actually dared commit murder right in front of his eyes? Evil brat, you are too inhumane. Is that right? Ling Han stretched out a hand. He grabbed the elder's spirit that had yet to disperse, and the latter's memories were quickly displayed at a fast speed. Raped his maid when he was 15, to take possession of a woman by force, he killed her husband when he was 21. He tortured 2 girls below 12 years old to death when he was 32. Ho ho, such an old beast, what is the point of leaving him alive any further? Ling Han's eyes were cold as he swept his gaze over the members of the Ding clan around him. Can I even find a single good person in your Ding clan? The members of the Ding clan were all infuriated. What were such paltry matters worth? There were so many people in the celestial realm, and merely the population of Dark Moon City numbered in tens of billions. Even if they killed people every single day for entertainment, the people they killed would still be less than the people who would be newly born, so what was there to be so concerned about? I know the answer just by looking at your expressions. Ling Han clenched a fist, and his knuckles cracked loudly. Since the heavens did not open their eyes to punish you, then I will just have to do the job instead. His killing intent was on full display. The only emotion that he had left towards this bunch of animals that wore the disguise of human beings was an uncontrollable killing intent. They were just animals, so what if they were killed? He walked out, and with a wave of his fist, pang, 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 there immediately were over a dozen people that were punched so hard they burst, turning into showers of blood that splattered in all directions. Today, a river of blood will definitely be flowing in the Ding clan. Ling Han declared, his voice as cold as if he was the god of death from hell. Chapter 1754, The Ancestral Shrine of the Ding Clan Suffers Calamity Again. Despicable brat, stop! Ding Jun roared in fury. Every punch from Ling Han would result in the deaths of over a dozen clansmen, and there were even some among them that were his direct descendants, so how could he hold himself back from going crazy? He leaped out, launching an offensive at Ling Han. Grand Elder is mighty. Grand Elder is dominating. Destroy this criminal. The surviving members of the Ding clan all shouted loudly. There had never been anyone that dared to enter into the Ding clan manor alone and start a massacre like this. Ding Jun charged over, and used a secret technique of time that could age all attacks. This way, he could take advantage of the opening and kill his opponent. Ling Han's eyes turned even colder, and he declared, "Today, I will get justice for the Hu clan." Wang, this was like a bolt of lightning out of the blue, causing Ding Jun's head to go numb from the shock. He exclaimed, "So you are one of the surviving dregs of the Hu clan." No wonder Ling Han had always opposed the Ding clan, and had even drawn the Han clan, which was completely unrelated, to them, causing the ancestral shrine of the Ding clan to be destroyed. As it turned out, Ling Han was actually a descendant of the Hu clan. All this finally had a logical explanation. Yet Ling Han did not intend to clarify things. Since Ding Jun had misunderstood, he would just let it be. In any case, he was here to commit murder. When he made his move, it did not appear to be very fast, yet he forced his way through Ding Jun's offensive, and grabbed the latter's neck in a single move. The neck of a great First Severance Grand Elder was held like he was a duck being grabbed for slaughter, his limbs struggling helplessly. This gap in strength was as wide as the distance between heaven and earth. Ling Han used his other hand to grab onto Ding Jun's neck as well, and with a twist, a cracking sound was heard, and Ding Jun's neck was broken. Pooh! A fountain of blood sprayed out, and the old guy's limbs drooped suddenly as he came to look like a dead dog. He was indeed dead. The vitality in his physical body had been eliminated, and even his spirit had been destroyed by Ling Han's power of regulation. He did not even have the chance to escape from his physical body. Ling Han threw Ding Jun's body to the side with a casual toss. Of course, he did not forget to frisk the latter for items like any spatial god tools first. A dead silence enveloped the surroundings. Grand Elder Ding Jun was dead, not even being able to survive a single blow from Ling Han. Killing him had been as easy as slaughtering a dog or killing a chicken. That was a First Severance Grand Elder. Everyone's legs began to shake wildly. They wanted to flee, but felt as if their legs were stuck in cement, and they could not even move a single muscle. Ling Han did not give them any mercy. As he shot out a punch, over a dozen people suddenly exploded, both their form and spirit destroyed. "Spare us!" Some who were weak-willed immediately knelt down to beg Ling Han for mercy. "You disdainful descendants, don't beg for mercy from this executioner. Do you think that he would spare us just because of this?" There were some who had stronger backbone, and stood there with their heads held high, glaring steadily at Ling Han as if they were determined to remember his face. Even after death, they would turn into ghosts and avenge themselves. How could Ling Han possibly be concerned? Today, there was only one thing he was going to bring to the Ding clan, and that was death. Wherever he passed, all members of the Ding clan would be killed. Ling Han and the Empress continued onwards. He was unfamiliar with the Ding clan manor. Thus, he naturally headed to the ancestral shrine of the Ding clan. He was familiar with that place. Despicable brat. Quick, go and inform Lord Patriarch. Ah! Wherever Ling Han passed, he would not leave a single person alive. He had seen too much. There was not a single good person in the Ding clan at all. Something like mercy was really too much of a luxury for the Ding clan. Over 2 hours later, Ling Han and the Empress arrived at the ancestral shrine of the Ding clan. 2 years had already passed, so the ancestral shrine of the Ding clan had naturally been completely rebuilt. It was lavish and glorious, and still appeared so dignified and austere. A bunch of evil villains, doing evil while you were alive, and can be worshipped and enjoy the incense from your descendants even while dead? Ling Han smirked coldly. He shot out a fist, and began his destruction. There was a legend in the celestial realm: if one had died, and his memorial tablet was built, and received worship and incense, then that person's spirit would reform and would be reincarnated among the descendants of his bloodline once enough time had passed. If this succeeded, this bloodline descendant would be able to easily reach the height that that person had reached when he had been alive, and for a clan, the significance of this was extraordinary. Moreover, this also satisfied the desire for eternal life. After all, there was still the matter of the immortals' tribulation. In fact, there were not many elites that could really attain eternal life in the celestial realm. There were only a great many old monsters who had lived chillingly long lives. The Ding clan had built this ancestral shrine in hopes that those old ancestors could reform their souls, and come back to life among their descendants, adding more elites to the ranks of the Ding clan. They were villains that had died so many years ago, and they still wanted to come back to life and commit evil once more? Of course it was not to be allowed. Ling Han used his full strength. Hong, long, long, the whole ancestral shrine shook madly, but it was not destroyed for the moment. That was because there was a protective formation guarding this place, and Ling Han wasn't a fourth severance elite the likes of Han Lu, so his destructive power could not compare. However, he immediately used the 9 heavens flame, Xianin source water, and power of lightning, and this destructive power was very frightening. Especially in the case of the 9 heavens flame and the Xianin source water. Their might could not be measured in terms of cultivation level. As long as they made contact with the target, the great Tao would show its power, and everything would be destroyed. Actually, the power of lightning was also very terrifying. It was the strongest power of the immortal realm, but an upper limit was placed on its might in the ancient realm. However, after Ling Han had entered into the celestial realm, this upper limit was released, and its might was really extraordinarily powerful. From a certain aspect, this power of lightning was also born from heaven and earth, and in truth, it could also be considered a source power. The memorial tablets of the ancestors. Just what sin has our Ding clan committed to deserve this? A great many elders that were paying their respects in the ancestral shrine were all sobbing as they exclaimed. They had all run out and turned furious glares on Ling Han. If looks could kill, Ling Han would definitely have been torn into pieces. Brat! A roar of anger rang out, and another elite had finally arrived. Ding Xuang, first Severance Grand Elder. He was a very outstanding clansman of the Ding clan. He had advanced at a very early age, and thus he looked to be only in his 40s, his vitality as expansive as an ocean. He shouted loudly, and the vitality around him rippled as if he was a demon king that had emerged from obscurity, maintaining a threatening manner. Ding Xiaochen had also appeared. He was staring at his foe, Ling Han, with a dumbfounded look. He really did not know how to describe his present feelings. The strength of this enemy had already reached a level that he could only look up to. He only dared keep his hatred in his heart, yet did not even dare to show a slight inkling of it. He had already repeatedly suffered punishment at Ling Han's hands, so he did not even dare to have a temper anymore. A thought flashed in Ling Han's mind, and he softly exclaimed, "Battle Beast, appear." Suddenly, 3 streaks of light surged out from within his body. The white light formed into a tiger, the red light formed into a bird, and the blue light was a thunder beast. 10 Beasts Technique, the core celestial technique of the multitude beasts celestial king. After so many days, he had slightly grasped some of the profound mysteries of the 10 beasts technique, and could form 3 battle beasts, which respectively had the 9 heavens flame, Xianin source water, and heavenly tribulations lightning as their cores. He was going to try out the might of these 3 battle beasts. The moment these 3 battle beasts appeared, their murderous aura suddenly soared. Some people who were more cowardly were so terrified that they were beginning to throw up from fear. Ding Shuang had also paled in shock. He had a feeling that even he would be easily killed if any one of these battle beasts attacked him. How was this possible? He looked at Ling Han for a while longer, and a powerful astonishment involuntarily appeared in his expression. Severing mundane tier. Why you actually advanced into the severing mundane tier? The heavens were blind. Such a bastard that should be killed 100 times over had actually advanced into the severing mundane tier. Chapter 1755, Battling Ding Yaolong. If anyone can survive 3 moves from my battle beasts, I will only cripple your cultivation level and spare your life, Ling Han said calmly. With a point of his finger, the white tiger immediately pounced out. Murderous aura soared into the skies, and the coldness was menacing. This white tiger was formed with the Xianin source water as its core, so it was naturally incredibly and extraordinarily cold. Furthermore, the Xianin source water was a source power of the heaven and earth. What kind of awesome existence was that? Ding Shuang raised his hand, making a motion to parry this attack. But he had just raised his hand when an endless coldness attacked him, completely encasing his body in ice. He could not even move another finger. Ice crystals had formed on his hair, his beard, and his brows, and his blood naturally had also been frozen. His whole person had become an icicle. The white tiger pounced, and with a slight wave of its paw, Ding Shuang's whole figure exploded into shards. Both form and spirit were destroyed. Under such extreme coldness, his spirit was also imprisoned in his mind. Even if he had wanted to flee, he could not, and could only be destroyed along with his physical body. This 10 beasts technique was really frightening. The source power of the heaven and earth was really terrifying. All the members of the Ding clan were transfixed with shock as they watched. The Grand Elder that was like a god of war in their eyes was actually not even a match for the battle beast that this evil criminal had released. Just how wide was the power gap between them? Destroy them. Ling Han stated calmly, and the 3 battle beasts immediately began an open slaughter. They were completely invincible, and even a first severance Grand Elder was no match for them, so what were mere Genesis tears and eternal river tears worth? Wherever the white tiger passed, everything would be frozen in ice, and every time its paw slammed down, it would all be shattered. The vermilion bird flew past, turning all into ash and not leaving the slightest bit of remains behind, and as the thunder beast stomped past, the divine punishment of lightning would blast madly, exploding everything into pieces. I haven't tried this move out yet. Ling Han used the cracking light sphere. This was a secret technique of lightning which he had obtained from the heavenly tribulation fluid. However, he had never used it before, because this was a powerful move that made no difference between enemies and allies, and would attack all but the user. And he had not encountered any situation before this that it was him alone versus an army of 100, or 1,000, so there was naturally no need for him to use this move. But as for now, he would use this to destroy the ancestral shrine of the Ding clan. Boom! The cracking light sphere exploded, and the terrifying power of lightning rippled out, its destructive power astonishing. This move needed a long time to accumulate power before it could be used. Furthermore, the longer he built up power, the stronger it would be. In fact, it could reach an extent that it would kill him first before anything else. Thus, when even Ling Han felt strained, the power of this strike could be imagined. And it was with this strike that 1/10 of the ancestral shrine of the Ding clan had been immediately destroyed. The gap is too big. Yet Ling Han shook his head. When Han Lu had moved previously, he had razed this place to the ground very easily and very casually, but his full effort was actually only capable of destroying 1/10 of the place. This was his gap with a fourth severance. But didn't he realize? He was only a first severance now, and furthermore, he had just reached the middle stage of the first severance, so wasn't having so much battle prowess already awesome enough? Were you really planning to defy the heavens? Ding Xiaochen was also killed in the chaotic battle. He did not know the reason for all this, and only thought that everything was due to the fact that he had trifled with Ling Han. His heart was filled with who knew how much regret. After death, how was he supposed to be able to face his ancestors? Ling Han. A voice that was filled with endless ice and fury rang out. The strongest elite of the Ding clan had finally appeared. Ding Yaolong. Previously, he had been cultivating in seclusion. Even if there was little hope, he had not given up the idea of attempting to break through to the dividing soul tier, but reality only gave him disappointment time and time again. When he sensed that unforeseen misfortune had happened within the clan, he finally emerged from his seclusion. Then, he saw that their ancestral shrine was almost close to being destroyed again. Ding Yaolong was almost about to go crazy. The destruction of the ancestral shrine occurred twice. And both times were because of Ling Han. You evil brat that deserves death. Did you have some kind of natural repulsion with the Ding clan or something? Ling Han stopped. His 3 battle beasts also returned immediately. Ding Yaolong was a fourth severance, and Ling Han definitely could not afford to underestimate him. Today, I have come on behalf of the Hu clan to seek an accounting for some old debts, and the next time, I will come on my own behalf, and raise your Ding clan completely to the ground. The Hu clan. Suddenly, Ding Yaolong's heart clenched. He sinisterly exclaimed, "So you are a surviving dreg of the Hu clan. You really deserve death, and we did not completely obliterate the whole lot of you." At first, he had thought that with the intervention of a celestial king-level force, the Hu clan was definitely finished. He had not thought that there would be any survivors that would become this huge calamity for them in the future left. Ling Han chuckled. There was no need for him to explain the exact details of his experience. "Then allow me to send you on your way," Ding Yaolong declared coldly. He shot out a fist, and the power of time surged. This secret technique of the Hu clan was indeed powerful, and it had now become the strongest technique in the Ding clan's repertoire. The 3 battle beasts roared at the same time, and pounced at Ding Yaolong. Sha, sha, sha. The battle beasts pounced towards him, but they were destroyed by the power of Tide of the Ages. This secret technique was too powerful. As long as the other's cultivation level was inferior, any attack would be pointless. In fact, even if the opponent's power surpassed his own, he might not be able to wound Ding Yaolong either. Below Celestial King tier, the regulations of time were really too strong. Ling Han used Lightning Flash, and did not resist Ding Yaolong head-on. At present, he, too, could just barely sustain a few blasts from a 3rd Severance Elite, but definitely would not be able to hold up against a 4th Severance if he insisted on taking it head-on. It was possible, but he would have to channel the indestructible Heaven Scroll, and he would not be able to last very long. Again. He reformed another 3 battle beasts, and it was very easy for Ding Yaolong to disperse this attack. However, it was not realistic that he would be able to hurt the battle beasts that had the 9 heavens flame and Xianin source water as their core. He had added the secret technique of time onto the 3 battle beasts, using Tide of the Ages to vie with Tide of the Ages. Go! The 3 battle beasts pounced forwards once more, and launched an offensive against Ding Yaolong. However, this time still did not reach Ling Han's expected target. Though the battle beasts repeatedly attacked, in the clash against the power of time, their own power of time would also disappear rapidly. When the power of time in them had vanished completely, their bodies would also immediately wear and age before disappearing. This gap in cultivation level was really quite big, after all. But Ding Yaolong got a scare. He had not thought that those 3 battle beasts had nearly torn through his defenses. This young man was really too frightening and too freakish. If he did not get rid of him today, the Ding clan would really be in danger. Ding Yaolong summoned a bell. It was completely inky black, and he had just taken it out, but it had already caused a change in the heaven and earth. A dark cloud was cast over the skies above the Ding clan manor and rippled endlessly. There were flashes of lightning flickering in it, as if a divine punishment was about to descend, yet there was still something missing. Ling Han couldn't help but be surprised. Ding Yaolong definitely did not seem like he was about to break through, so this heavenly tribulation should have come for the bell. Could it be that this treasured tool had just been completed, drawing the descent of a heavenly tribulation? That was not right. If the heavenly tribulation had really been about to descend, it would have long since descended by now. Why would it seem like it was about to descend and yet not like this? That is divine punishment. A voice rang out from the sidelines. It was the large black dog. Its tongue lolled out of its mouth as it said, "If someone has done too much evil, and caused too much harm to the peace of the world, it would draw a punishment from the heaven and earth." It was nothing unusual for the large black dog to appear and disappear mysteriously. Perhaps it had been drawn here because it saw that there was a large commotion breaking out here. What surprised Ling Han was that the large black dog had actually also advanced to the severing mundane tier. Where did it go to advance into the severing mundane tier and become a celestial? Ling Han frowned, and said, "But the target of the divine punishment is that bell. That must be because the process of refining this bell involved too many sins, and its existence is not permitted by the heaven and earth," the large black dog said solemnly, and showed a rare expression filled with killing intent. This Ding clan must have committed many crimes, and caused much bloodshed for this precious tool. Brother Ling, there is no need to give me any face. Slaughter this old geezer, and then destroy that bell. Chapter 1756, Bell of 10,000 Ghosts. Was this not a nonsensical question? Ling Han only stared at that bell. If he was able to defeat Ding Yaolong, why did he have to declare that he would come back again in the future? He was only a first severance, and no matter how freakish he was still just a first severance. He could defeat all opponents in the second severance, and just barely matching the early stage of the third severance already made him a freak among freaks. As for the fourth severance, the gap was really too wide. As Ding Yaolong waved the bell, it released an endless black chi, and he declared, "This is called the Black Mist Bell of 10,000 Ghosts." Innumerable years ago, the ancestors of our Ding clan had already begun to refine it. However, refining this object would require the sacrifice of innumerable living souls. To avoid being erased by divine punishment, every ancestor would only refine a small portion, and after innumerable years, it has finally been refined successfully. If it was not for the fact that your potential is too frightening, despicable brat, I really would not want to expose the secret of the Bell of 10,000 Ghosts yet. The black mists surged out, turning into an ocean, and multiple skulls appeared in the hazy ocean, releasing sharp cries that could easily make any severing mundane tear bleed from all the 7 apertures. If an ordinary first severance was here, his soul would probably be separated from his physical body easily with a few waves of this bell. Tight situation, retreat. The large black dog broke into a run and fled. "I will retreat first, the mission of the envoy of justice will be up to you, brat." At this moment, it did not have a sliver of seriousness left. If anyone actually trusted this large black dog, that person was definitely too naive and kind. Ling Han also leaped to the Empress's side. If there was the slightest danger, the two of them would enter into the Black Tower together. "Humph, before the Bell of 10,000 Ghosts, you still think you can escape alive?" Ding Yaolong asked coldly. He had summoned even this kind of top-secret weapon, so he was naturally filled with the determination to kill Ling Han. Among the ghostly wails and shrill cries, innumerable skulls pounced towards Ling Han and the Empress, each of them possessing the battle prowess of a third severance. Though it was only the third severance, just how many were there? More than 10,000. Thus, putting aside the fact that Ling Han and the Empress were only in the first severance, even if it was a fourth severance Grand Elder facing this kind of precious tool, he would probably only be able to flee pitifully. True, if the might of the Bell of 10,000 Ghosts was not so strong, what need would there be for the ancestors of the Ding clan to refine it, undertaking the risk of sustaining divine punishment for so many generations? Mere spirits, scram! Ling Han shouted loudly, releasing the 9 heavens flame. Boom, the fiery flames surged out, turning into a circle which protected himself and the Empress inside. This was effective, compelling the skulls to stay outside the circle. Yet the skulls in front would pounce, followed quickly by those behind, and when each skull collided with the circle, they would expend a portion of the flames. If this went on, it would not take long before they would be able to invade the circle. Even so, Ding Yaolong was still incredibly stunned. If it was him that was besieged by the Bell of 10,000 Ghosts, the situation would definitely not be much better than what Ling Han was facing now. But who was he? This naturally was the credit of the 9 heavens flame. The ancestral flames of the heaven and earth were incredibly dominating. Unfortunately, Ling Han's cultivation level was too low, which limited the might of the 9 heavens flame. Otherwise, let alone whatever Bell of 10,000 Ghosts, even celestial kings would shiver at the sight of it. No matter how freakish this despicable brat was, he finally would not be able to escape the fate of death now. Ding Yaolong revealed a slightly twisted expression, and declared, "Despicable brat, after you're dead, I will snatch away all your fated opportunities, and as for the woman beside you, I will turn into a beautiful corpse, and I am sure that a great many people would be willing to toy with her." With his identity, he should not have said such threats, but who asked Ling Han to have destroyed the ancestral shrine of the Ding clan twice, and Ding Yaolong's heart was really filled with too much hatred. If he did not say a few words at this moment, he would not be able to appease his anger even if he tore Ling Han into pieces. "I never thought that you are this type of person, Ding Yaolong." The large black dog had circled back, and appeared behind Ding Yaolong. It immediately aimed a bite at him. "Ah!" Ding Yaolong cried out in pain. He had not imagined that the large black dog would appear and disappear so suddenly, and was able to emerge behind him without any prior signs like this. This bite landed very solidly on him. In the past, when the large black dog had not yet become a celestial, Han Lu, who was similarly a fourth severance, had still sustained a harsh bite from the large black dog. And now that the large black dog had advanced into the severing mundane tier, even if Ding Yaolong was slightly stronger than Han Lu, his actual gap with the large black dog had actually shrunken many times over. This bite caused Ding Yaolong's spine to straighten suddenly, and his hips abruptly leaned forwards. See Grandpa Dog's monkey stealing peaches. The large black dog was prepared for this. It released its bite and turned around, quickly arriving in front of Ding Yaolong. Then, it shot out a firm leg, harshly kicking over, and hitting directly at Ding Yaolong's raised crotch. "Pa!" The sound of N*TS being crushed rang out. Even if Ding Yaolong was a fourth severance Grand Elder, so what? This was not just having his N*TS ache, but having even his N*TS crushed. "Ah!" He released a sharp wail, his legs suddenly clenching tightly together, and even his face having turned pale. Grandpa Dog's last strike of the 3 consecutive moves, crippling chrysanthemum. The large black dog circled around behind Ding Yaolong, and stabbed his dog's paw straight into the latter's behind. "Ah!" This time, Ding Yaolong's cry was really felt with overwhelming agony. His at news having sustained a severe injury, he screamed in pain once more, the misery in his voice indescribable. Success, retreat. The large black dog broke into a run and fled. Its style had always been sneak attacks and cheap tricks. As for head-on confrontation? What did that mean? Grandpa Dog had absolutely no idea. Ding Yaolong clenched his legs tightly together, one hand covering his behind, while the other was still holding onto the bell. No matter how one looked at it, this scene was really out of sorts. Ling Han couldn't help but break into raucous laughter. The large black dog's cheap tricks followed one after another. In the future, he really could not afford to be careless around it. This cunning dog made no distinction between allies and enemies. If he did not take caution, and fell for one of its tricks in future, he wouldn't even have anywhere to cry. In this manner, Ding Yaolong was rendered unable to continue to spin the bell of 10,000 ghosts, and his attack dispersed by itself without Ling Han having to do anything to resolve it. Ding Yaolong! A gruff shout rang out, and the Grand Elder of the Long clan appeared, his expression cold as ice. I did not think that your Ding clan had actually refined such a vicious evil tool in secret. No wonder the clansmen of our Long clan would occasionally disappear. As it turned out, they had all fallen into your poisonous hands. Xiao, another figure appeared. The Grand Elder of the Duan clan had also come. His eyes were also fixed on the bell of 10,000 ghosts menacingly. Ding Yaolong, I need an explanation from you today, he stated calmly, but an incomparable determination was clear in his tone. All of a sudden, Ding Yaolong actually became the target of a combined interrogation from two great Fourth Severance Grand Elders. These two were not Han Lu, but were true prodigies. The victor would be difficult to decide if it was a duel, but in a battle of 2 against 1, he would definitely be in trouble. Of course, if it really exploded into a fierce battle, he would definitely be able to inflict severe injury, or even cause death to at least one of them at the cost of his life. Ding Yaolong humphed, and declared, "What do I need to explain? Get out of the way, both of you. Otherwise, I will slaughter the two of you as well." No matter what, he was definitely going to kill Ling Han today. Duh. Blood was dripping from both the crotch of his trousers and behind, and accompanied by his present cold and aloof expression, the force of the impact was quite strong. Though the Grand Elders Duan and Long were both furious and filled with hate, when they saw this miserable appearance of Ding Yaolong, especially when he was holding his legs tightly together as if he had been raped, their aged faces involuntarily twitched. They really wanted to laugh. Their urge to laugh was seen by Ding Yaolong, and he couldn't help but tremble in fury. Two elites of the same level were actually smiling at him. Their smiles were not of friendliness, instead, they were laughing at him. He was very angry, close to exploding with fury. "All of you, die," he roared loudly, and the bell of 10,000 ghosts was used once more. Chapter 1757, A Young Soul Elite Arrives. The bell of 10,000 ghosts was really too terrifying. If a treasure could also be divided into a flawless severance and normal severance, then the bell of 10,000 ghosts was definitely a flawless severance, and had furthermore attained a flawless severance through striking the heaven and earth. It definitely could overwhelm all elites of the same level. Otherwise, the Ding clan would have been too foolish to pay such a great price to refine it. Thus, when the ghostly mist appeared, the Grand Elders of both the Duan and Long clan could only evade, and Ling Han and the Empress used lightning flash, similarly leaving the territory that was enshrouded by the ghostly mist. The fierce ghosts wailed shrilly, rolling about in the black mist. Those eerie screams caused a considerable effect on Ling Han and the others, causing them to bleed from their 7 apertures and also look similar to a ghost. What a frightening treasured tool! The only one who was unaffected was Ding Yaolong. He was the user of the treasured tool, so he was naturally immune to its effects. As for the large black dog, he had really run away too far, so he was unaffected as well. Ling Han's physique was strong, and his spirit had also been tempered by the indestructible heaven scroll. Though he was bleeding from his 7 apertures, he could still hold on. The Empress had 9 doppelgangers. In this half a year's time, she had already destroyed a few, which she had later formed again, so the attack that she sustained could be divided equally among all 10 of them, so she could bear it as well. After all, this was only a portion of the full might of the Bell of 10,000 Ghosts. The Grand Elders Duan and Long were still fine. Their cultivation level was still strong, and it would be too difficult for mere sound waves to inflict injury on them. Thus, though the 4 of them looked very pitiful, they were completely capable of holding on. "Take down the ringleader first," the Grand Elders of the Duan and Long clans exclaimed softly, and charged towards Ding Yaolong. They could not continue being a submissive target like this, after all. But Ding Yaolong did not even move at all, and only summoned the black mist towards him so that it surrounded him. In this manner, if the 2 Grand Elders of the Duan and Long clan were to attack him forcibly, they would be trapped by the black mist, and that would definitely be big trouble. "You 2 old bastards, I had planned to kill the 2 of you after a few 100 million years past, but since I have already exposed the secret of the Bell of 10,000 Ghosts today, I will take this chance to slaughter all of you," Ding Yaolong declared coldly. The Grand Elders of the Duan and Long clan were both marveling at their luck in secret. They had not imagined that the Ding clan would actually refine such an evil treasured tool, and more importantly, they had actually refined it successfully. It should be known that the heaven and earth would bestow a punishment to erase the person who had refined this kind of evil weapon, but looking at the situation now, there seemed to be a mysterious force that was suppressing the evil of this Bell of 10,000 Ghosts. It was still missing a slight bit, and had yet to reach the requirement for drawing a divine punishment onto it. Thus, though the thunderclouds had formed, the divine punishment had still not descended all this while. If Ding Yaolong had taken this Bell of 10,000 Ghosts when they had completely no expectation of it, they definitely would have been finished. Thankfully, they knew about it now. If they knew about it, it would be fine. This was only a pseudo-celestial tool that was equivalent to the 4th Severance, after all. Ding Yaolong battled 2 great First Severance Grand Elders on his own, but not only did he force the 2 great Grand Elders into dodging and evading in a tizzy, he could still spare a hand to launch attacks at Ling Han and the Empress. The person he most wanted to kill was still Ling Han. If Ling Han was allowed to flee this time, the Ding clan would definitely be done for. This brat had to die. Ling Han and the Empress continued to channel and use lightning flash continuously. After advancing into the severing mundane tier, both their power and grasp of regulations had improved many folds over. Thus, they would not be tired after using lightning flash a few times. They did not retreat, because Ling Han wanted to know just how powerful this evil weapon was so he could decide when he would come charging back the next time. When he next came to the Ding clan manor, he would definitely not flee any longer. Instead, he would destroy the Ding clan entirely. Grand Elder. Just at this moment, a voice shouted out, filled with fury. Ding Song. Previously, he had headed to the Han clan, and had just made his way back. The first thing he saw was that the ancestral shrine had again been ripped apart, so his fury was naturally out of bounds. He immediately spotted Ling Han, and his eyes narrowed. He instinctively thought that all this was caused by Ling Han. He really had not guessed wrongly. This person is Ling Han. There was another person next to Ding Song, dressed completely in black. There were multiple patterns that looked like spiders on his clothing, causing one to subconsciously feel disgust upon seeing them. This was a man who looked to be in his 40s. There were actually patterns on his face as well, stretching all the way to his neck, and it was probable that he had them on his chest, though they were not visible at this moment. He looked longer at the Empress's face, and an incredibly stunned expression involuntarily appeared on his face. A strong change took place in his gaze. In reply to "Milord, that despicable brat is Ling Han." Ding Song hurriedly replied with utter respect. This blood-clad man's name was Han Hongfei, and he was a young soul Grand Elder of the Han clan. Dividing Soul Tier was divided into the 4 cultivation levels of Heaven Soul, Earth Soul, Yin Soul, and Yang Soul. Though Yang Soul was only the first level, the gap between Severing Mundane Tier and Dividing Soul Tier was similar to the gap between Genesis Tier and Severing Mundane Tier. No matter how prodigious you were, there was no way to possibly compensate for this gap. Han Hongfei reluctantly withdrew his gaze from the Empress's face. Then, he looked at Ling Han, and calmly stated, "You may commit suicide, and as for that girl, come here." He was completely issuing a command. This was natural, he was a young soul elite, and who could be an equal match for him here? The Grand Elder of Duan clan could not help but point out, "Milord, this is Dark Moon City." Dark Moon City was under the administration of the Black Moon sect, and above the Black Moon sect was the Fu clan. No matter how one looked at it, it was not up to the Han clan to show off their military might here. "Are you threatening me?" Han Hongfei swept a cold look over the Grand Elder of the Duan clan. The aura at the level of Yang Soul rippled out, as if the heavens itself was collapsing. The Grand Elder of the Duan clan suddenly spat out blood. The difference between their cultivation levels was too huge. He could not even hold up against one look or the release of his aura. The Grand Elder of the Long clan gripped his hands into tightly clenched fists, yet only dared to keep his fury in his heart. Facing the bell of 10,000 ghosts, he could still parry and dodge, but against a young soul elite, he would be dead with a single gesture of his hand. "Milord, I cannot apprehend this boy, so please help me." Ding Yaolong put the bell of 10,000 ghosts away. Since someone from the Han clan had come, who was further a young soul elite, Ling Han would definitely be dead, and there was no further need for him to make any more moves. Han Hongfei only acted as if he had not heard him. Why would he need to give a mere 4th severance any regard? Without entering into Dividing Soul Tier, 4th severance was mere trash. He cast another look at Ling Han and the Empress, and a hint of impatience showed in his expression. "What are you still standing around for? Old bastard, has your head been kicked by a mule?" Ling Han couldn't help but throw insults. "If you want to die, then you can go and die on your own. Get lost. Holy fuck." Han Hongfei was involuntarily stunned, and then flew into a thunderous rage. A 1st Severance Junior actually dared point his finger at him and insult him straight to his face? He humphed, and immediately stretched out a hand to grab at Ling Han. Hong, origin power, broad and powerful, spread out. This was the strike of a Dividing Soul Tier, so how could anything from a Severing Mundane Tier compare? Even a 4th severance was far inferior. "Old bastard, you are only drawing trouble for the Han clan. I will eventually go to the Han clan and seek you out for an accounting." Ling Han threw down these words, grabbed the Empress, and entered into the Black Tower, ultimate invincible escape. Xiao, the two of them immediately vanished. Han Hongfei's palm strike descended and completely missed its target, yet the ancestral shrine of the Ding clan that was initially only half destroyed completely crumbled under this strike. This was a Dividing Soul Tier elite's attack. Ding Yaolong's mouth twitched, and he felt like the ancestors of all the previous generations would probably be climbing out of their graves to find and punish him. Chapter 1758, Invitation from the Large Black Dog. The search for the whereabouts of Ling Han and the Empress naturally ended in failure again. And from this, Ling Han found out that at least a Dividing Soul Tier elite was still not strong enough to discover the existence of the Black Tower, and when he thought further about it, the Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire, too, did not show any reaction about the Black Tower. Thus, this line of safety could completely be stretched to the Immortal Palace Tier. If he encountered an Ascending Origin Tier elite, he would have to be careful. In any case, Celestial Kings were definitely capable of discovering the existence of the Black Tower. This was something that small tower had reminded him about over and over again. Han Hongfei was very furious. He, a powerful young-souled Grand Elder, had made a move, and he was actually going to return empty-handed? He did not only want to apprehend Ling Han to preserve the prestige of the Han clan, but also wanted to snatch all the fated opportunities belonging to Ling Han, which very possibly could contain a celestial king technique. If it was not for the fact that the Han clan did not want to draw attention, they'd actually very much want to send an immortal palace tier elite over. Finally, when Han Hongfei saw the Empress, he had gained inappropriate desires as well. This kind of exquisite beauty was definitely enough to enchant anyone, and he could not control himself at all. Unfortunately, all his wishes had turned out to be moot. What could he do if he could not even find his target? Even if he was very powerful, it was completely useless. He dug 3 feet into the ground in a search, unwilling to give up the matter. He was definitely not going to believe that Ling Han was capable of using a spatial teleportation secret technique in front of him. In this manner, the ancestral shrine of the Ding clan was completely ruined. At first, the ancestral shrine could still be rebuilt, and the memorial tablets could be rearranged, and then they would be able to return 18 years later as a good man. But the situation now was Han Hongfei had refined every single tile and brick into nothing. He worried that Ling Han's spatial god tool was extremely small, which would allow him to escape by passing off as rubble. Ding Yaolong's face had turned pale, and as he watched the memorial tablets of Ding, so on and so forth being refined, his heart was dripping blood. The ancestors. He did not dare stop him, and his hatred for Ling Han only intensified many times over in his heart. He swore that if he had the chance, he would definitely tear Ling Han into pieces. Not only did Han Hongfei refine all the objects on the ground once over, he even removed layer after layer of the ground, right until groundwater surged out of the ground, turning the area of the ancestral shrine of the Ding clan into a lake, and only then did he reluctantly give up. He really could not find that brat. Could it be that he really had used some kind of spatial secret technique? The secret technique of a celestial king? Gasp! Immediately, his expression changed drastically, and he showed an incredibly jealous expression. There was a gap of a whole major tier, which meant 4 minor levels, between himself and Ling Han. This difference in strength was really too boundless, but he still managed to pull the wool over his eyes. This kind of secret technique was really too powerful. If he could obtain it, then wouldn't he have no need to fear even if faced with an immortal palace tier elite? Han Hongfei was unwilling to give up, and took residence in the Ding clan manor. In any case, Celestials had a limitless lifespan, so he could completely afford to wait. He was taking a gamble that perhaps Ling Han was still in the vicinity. That was because he had indeed not sensed any ripple in time and space. Perhaps Ling Han had only temporarily entered into a separate dimension, and that was why he could not discover his existence. With Han Hongfei keeping watch, the Duan clan and Long clan naturally did not dare mobilize troops against the Ding clan and rise in revolt about the matter of the Bell of 10,000 Ghosts. However, they immediately sent someone to report the issue to the Black Moon sect. In fact, if the Black Moon sect could not settle the matter, they would continue to report the matter further up the hierarchy. This kind of evil weapon definitely could not be allowed to appear. After Ling Han stayed for a few days in the Black Tower, he left quietly. He deliberately repressed his aura, and it was extremely difficult for even a young soul elite to discover him unless his eyes just happened to spot him, or he was overwhelmingly close to him. Little Han, come with Grandpa Dog. However, Ling Han had not walked for too long when the large black dog turned up from an unknown corner. He was standing on his hind legs, and slung an arm around Ling Han's shoulders as if they were close brothers. The nose of a dog was indeed sensitive. Yet Ling Han's heart was filled with caution. This large black dog would trick everyone and anyone, and one definitely could not trust its warm attitude. Otherwise, one would definitely fall for one of its tricks without even knowing it. What? He asked casually. Grandpa Dog discovered an ancient site, and there is a considerable number of celestial medicines there. Are you interested in taking a trip with Grandpa Dog? The large black dog asked. Ling Han was filled with suspicion. If there was actually something as good as that, you actually did not think of taking it all for your own? What kind of dog do you think Grandpa Dog is? The large black dog had an expression of indignant fury as if he had suffered some grave injustice. And to think that Grandpa Dog thought of you at the very first moment, yet you actually doubt me like this. Grandpa Dog must have gone blind, and trusted a cruel dog like you wrongly. Pay. Ling Han's expression was filled with disdain, and he retorted, your expression is so exaggerated, it is making me even more suspicious. The large black dog immediately came to an abrupt stop, stretched his paw into his iron underwear, and scratched. He bared his teeth in a grin. I didn't think that you would have discovered Grandpa Dog's true face so quickly. If I want to deceive you in the future, the difficulty level will increase considerably. Supporting his chin, he put on an expression of deep thought. That could not be allowed. Ling Han instantly sent a kick over. This damn dog was really despicable. All right, brat. That ancient site is slightly dangerous, and Grandpa Dog needs you to keep watch and become a hired thug. The large black dog revealed the truth as he leaped out of the way of the attack. Ling Han's expression was filled with suspicion. The large black dog definitely could not have spoken the truth so easily. However, though the large black dog was cunning, it did indeed seem like he had never truly harmed Ling Han before. Fine, I'll go. Ling Han nodded. With the help of celestial medicine, his cultivation level would advance even faster. If he could advance into the second severance, then he could easily kill any member of the Ding clan aside from Ding Yaolong himself. Even if he faced Ding Yaolong, he would not be like how he had been before, only managing to dodge and run. No matter what, he could counter at least once or twice. I knew that you're a cunning brat, and would definitely agree, the large black dog said, grinning. The man and dog arrived at a dense forest, and the large black dog drew out multiple pieces of godly metal which it arranged on the ground, building what looked similar to a sacrificial altar. This was not godly metal, but was rather pseudo-divine metal. Ling Han couldn't help but feel envious. He really wanted to steal a few pieces for himself. He did not mind how many stars the pseudo-divine metal was as long as he could toss them over to the divine demon sword to consume. However, he immediately curiously asked, Little Black, weren't we heading to some ancient site? Tui, how long do you plan on running on your two legs? Even if I am specialized in spatial teleportation, don't even think of reaching the place if we're not spending 10 to 15 days, the large black dog said disdainfully. You don't understand, brat. Grandpa Dog is presently constructing a teleportation formation. Ling Han was puzzled, and asked, You actually know how to use formations? Of course. All those years ago, i.e. The large black dog stopped moving his paws, and scratched his behind. What did I do all those years ago? So strange, I seem to have lost a large amount of my memories. Ling Han had the same feeling. The origin of the large black dog was definitely extraordinary. When he had still been in Genesis tier, he could bite the behind of a fourth severance Grand Elder. Though he did not manage to inflict injury with its bite, being able to bite the latter was already an incredibly bizarre feat. Ling Han was freakish enough, right? But if it was him who had to secretly approach a fourth severance Grand Elder and make a move on him without the latter realizing it, putting aside the fact that he was not capable of it in the Genesis tier, he could not possibly accomplish it even now. Grandpa Dog can't remember. The large black dog went nuts for a while, and then suddenly showed a wicked grin. Come, let's go and rob that ancient site completely. The speed at which he suddenly changed attitude was completely unexpected to Ling Han. What kind of thought process was going on in his head? The large black dog arranged for a very long while, and a small-scale sacrificial altar was already built. Ling Han and he ascended it, and the latter repeated a chant. That was an incredibly dry and obscure chant, and the pronunciation was very strange. Ling Han tried to repeat it, but shockingly discovered that he actually could not remember a single letter. Wang, it was at this moment that the sacrificial altar glowed, and the light wrapped around both man and dog. Then, it trembled slightly. When the light had dispersed, both Ling Han and the large black dog had disappeared without a trace. Chapter 1759, The Medicinal Garden. Ling Han only felt his vision blur, and he had already arrived in a forest. Though there were some similarities with the previous scenery, there were even more differences. The ground here was more yellowish, and the tree leaves were also wider and thicker, while their height was considerably lower, so sunlight could not penetrate the canopy. Ling Han raised his head, and his vision passed through the layers of leaves. He could clearly see that there was actually a sun hanging above their heads. It should be known that the celestial realm did not have any sun, and even the stars in the skies were not real stars, but merely multiple pieces of giant meteorites. Little Han, don't glance around, and follow Grandpa Dog quickly. The large black dog moved stealthily forwards. Don't create a slightest bit of noise. Ling Han frowned, and said, didn't you say that this was an ancient site? We haven't even gone in yet, so why should we have to be so cautious? Pei, who told you that one can just simply strut right into an ancient site? The large black dog did not even turn his head. This ancient site has already been taken by someone, so we have to be very careful. Otherwise, we could not possibly enter. Taken by whom? Ling Han asked. This large black dog was indeed undependable. It had not spoken the truth, and had actually concealed such important information. Don't worry about it. Anyways, we are here to commit robbery, so who cares whom we're robbing, the large black dog retorted very irresponsibly. Ling Han couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat, but when he thought about the fact that ancient sites had no owner in the first place, and it was not something that would belong to you just because you discovered it first, he nodded, his heart completely unburdened as he followed the large black dog's footsteps. After walking for a while, the large black dog suddenly spluttered into laughter, and said, Brat, if Grandpa Dog farted at this moment, you'd be so extremely invigorated, wouldn't you? Ling Han almost sent it a kick. Little Black, your taste is really getting worse and worse. Hee, that would have to depend on the person. I think your taste is not all that good either, Brat. The large black dog was not willing to be outdone. They walked for a while, and the large black dog continuously sniffed around with his nose. When he arrived at some bushes, he moved the bushes aside, and there was actually a pit underneath. However, looking at its shape, it was definitely a dog's hole. Ling Han gave it a glance, and asked with a strange expression, You aren't asking me to squeeze into a dog's hole, are you? What's wrong with a dog's hole? Has a dog's hole offended you? The large black dog immediately flew into a rage, and opened his mouth to bite Ling Han. Woof, you dare to look down on your Grandpa Dog? Ling Han drew out a chicken drumstick from his spatial god tool, and stuffed it into the large black dog's mouth, blocking it in this way, and said, Are you really reliable? Is there any such entrance into an ancient site? Pei, the main entrance is heavily guarded, so what can we do if we don't think of some alternative method? The large black dog had chewed up the chicken drumstick completely in a few bites. Do you have any more? Give me another. He had gotten addicted to the taste. Let's deal with business first. Ling Han refused. The large black dog took the lead, and squeezed into the dog's hole. He had created this hole, so it was naturally just fitting to his size. Ling Han was exasperated, and could only shrink his build, and began walking into the dog's hole. The dog's tunnel was extraordinarily long, and this also showed that this ancient site was extremely important. The force that had taken possession of it was guarding it very seriously, and the large black dog had to open a secret passage from very far away. After traveling for a whole 2 days, the large black dog finally stopped. The passage here had become considerably higher, so Ling Han could turn back to his original build, and would not need to worry that he would be squeezed. The tunnel had reached its end, and a wall appeared ahead of them. It was very strange, and looked like a painting that was capable of moving. Its color was changing continuously. This is the protective formation of the ancient site, just see how I will unravel it, the large black dog declared proudly. I'm not boasting around here, but there is practically no formation that exists in this world that is capable of blocking Grandpa Dog. Come, give Grandpa Dog a hand. Ling Han was also slightly accomplished in the art of formations. Though he was not able to set up a celestial level formation at the moment, he still had the insight. Just by looking at the large black dog's proficient movements, he knew that his level of mastery over formations was indeed very high. The reason why this damn dog had learned formations in the first place had to be so that it could break into the treasuries of others or something of the like. Guard against fire, guard against thieves, and guard against the large black dog. Brat, why are you looking at me like that? The large black dog stared at Ling Han while his 2 front paws moved incessantly. Nothing much. I was just considering if I should build a secret chamber or treasury or something of the sort in my residence in future, Ling Han said casually. Then just leave that up to Grandpa Dog. I guarantee that it will be the safest treasury in the world. The large black dog was filled with self-confidence. It is safe even against you? Ling Han asked. How could that be? The large black dog scoffed. I am the one to set up the formation, so how could it possibly be capable of blocking me? Ling Han sighed, and said, the individual I primarily want to guard against is you. Woof, you actually distrust me so much. The large black dog opened his mouth, wanting to bite Ling Han. However, his paws were currently occupied, so the large black dog could only turn his head, yet he could not get near enough. Wang, it was at this moment that an opening appeared in the formation of the ancient site, which looked like a vortex. Go in quickly. Ling Han and the large black dog scrambled in at the same time. Abruptly, spiritual qi that was indescribably dense enshrouded them, causing every single pore on Ling Han's body to relax and expand. They had appeared inside a medicinal garden, and there were various types of godly medicine being planted in the many spiritual fields. The spiritual qi here was like an ocean. If anyone with a lower cultivation level had come in, he would probably explode from just inhaling a single breath here. Ling Han let the Empress out. At present, they still needed to accumulate origin power. Though the importance of this had lessened, their origin power still could not be too weak, as it would not be able to support the high power of regulations. Yo, beauty! The large black dog waved a paw, but did not dare to be too insolent. No one could possibly relax completely in front of the Empress. The Empress's demeanor was too strong, too noble, and too poised. The Empress ignored him directly, so the large black dog could only sheepishly scratch his behind. Though this is a medicinal garden, the highest grade of godly medicine here is only level 20 godly medicine. Ling Han swept an eye over the surroundings. With the present pickiness of his, he was already not satisfied with mere saintly medicine. Instead, he wanted celestial medicine. You need to have patience, the large black dog exclaimed. Do you think that celestial medicines are just cabbages to be found anywhere? Even a celestial king tier level force could not possibly grow them all over the mountains and wilds. It is already very impressive if there is over a dozen celestial medicines. Then what about here? Ling Han asked. According to my estimation, there should be 1 or 2, at least, the large black dog deduced. There was no difference in level of celestial medicine. Their only difference was that they contained different regulations. The most important differentiating factor was their age. The older their age, the more regulations they could contain, and the more valuable they would naturally be. As they walked, Ling Han did not turn his back either. If he encountered matured medicinal ingredients, he would still take them into the Black Tower. Saintly medicines still had some use for him. At least they could help increase his accumulation of origin power. Though the increase would not be great, it was better than nothing. This was not the only medicinal garden here. When they had swept through this one, they exited by climbing over the wall, heading towards the next medicinal garden. But when they had just climbed over the wall, they saw a middle-aged man was presently using a technique to expedite the growth of the medicinal ingredients. All of a sudden, they were staring at each other, and there was an indescribable strangeness about the scene. You're tuning into the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.